Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere colder, rougher, and infinitely less comfortable than any medieval hut. A place where sleep isn't a luxury, it's an act of survival. Where the waves never stop, the air bites, and the only pillow you'll ever get is a frozen bundle of sheepskin that smells like the inside of a wet boot. We're talking about the Viking world. Not the fantasy version with horned helmets and polished armour, but the real thing. Creaking ships, dripping sails, and men half frozen to the deck, somewhere between Norway and nowhere. So before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe grab a blanket, dim the lights, and let the sound of my voice carry you back more than 1,000 years to a time when sleep came in stolen moments, between storms, surrounded by the freezing sea. Tonight, you're not in your bed. You're aboard a longship carved from oak, sailing through the North Atlantic in the dead of winter. There's no cabin, no fire, and no escape from the cold. The ship rocks endlessly, the air stings, and the smell of salt and sweat clings to everything. Around you, dozens of men lie wrapped in damp furs, their breath forming mist in the night. The sky is a deep bruise of clouds and starlight, and the waves slam against the hull with a rhythm that's both hypnotic and terrifying. Forget the movies where Vikings roar and feast endlessly. Most of their time wasn't spent raiding or fighting. It was spent enduring, waiting, freezing, trying to get a few hours of rest before the sea decided to throw another tantrum. They were explorers, traders, raiders, and sometimes unwilling insomniacs, caught between the demands of survival and the limits of human endurance. The North didn't forgive weakness. If you fell asleep at the wrong moment, you might never wake up. But if you didn't sleep at all, you'd fall apart long before you reached land. Every Viking who crossed those waters had to master the art of resting in chaos, of finding warmth in a place that had none. So, if you're ready, pull that blanket a little tighter, listen to the quiet hum of your room, and imagine the cold spray hitting your face. Because you're about to find out how the toughest sailors in history closed their eyes, even when the sea itself seemed determined to keep them awake. You wake to the sound of water slapping against wood. Not gentle, rhythmic water, but a hard, unkind crash that shudders through the planks beneath you. The cold reaches you before consciousness does, crawling under your cloak, sliding down your spine, and settling deep in your bones. You open your eyes, but there's nothing to see except grey sky above and grey sea below. You can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Everything moves, the air, the ship, your own lungs. You're lying on a Viking longship somewhere in the North Atlantic, and the sun hasn't bothered to show up yet. The smell hits next. Salt, tar, damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the faint sourness of old ale soaked into wood. Your nostrils sting from it. The deck is slick with frost, your breath puffs out in a cloud, and the ropes beside you are stiff from ice. You shift slightly, and your cloak crackles like parchment. It froze in the night again. You try to pull it tighter, but it's about as warm as wrapping yourself in a slab of bark. The fur beneath you is damp and clotted, half stiff from salt and half from something that might have been fish oil. Someone thought that would help keep the moisture out. It didn't. Around you, other men are beginning to stir. A low cough, the creak of leather, the muttered curse of someone realizing their boots froze solid overnight. There's no morning bell, no rooster, just the endless groan of the sea and the steady ache of the wind. You blink a few times, eyes watering from the cold. The horizon is still hidden, swallowed by fog so thick it could be mistaken for land. But there is no land. Not for days, maybe weeks. You're adrift in a world made entirely of grey. You try to stretch, but your muscles protest. Sleeping on a Viking longship isn't really sleeping. It's lying in a semi-conscious state, trying not to roll off the edge or get crushed by an oar. Your body never stops moving. Even in rest, it's bracing. The boards shift beneath you like breathing lungs, and your head thumps against the side of a chest you've been using as a pillow. Inside it are weapons, tools, maybe some dried fish. You don't know whose it is anymore. Ownership blurs out here. Everyone shares the same misery. Your fingers are numb. You lift one hand and stare at it, pale, cracked, smeared with pitch and grime. The nails are dark, either from dirt or dried blood. Hard to tell. The skin on your knuckles are split open from the cold, tiny red lines that sting when the wind finds them. You rub your palms together, then cup your mouth and breathe into them. The warmth lasts less than a heartbeat before the air steals it away. The ship itself groans like an old animal. Each plank expands and contracts with the moisture. You can hear the water seeping in through the seams, dripping somewhere below into the bilge. Someone will have to bail it out soon, but not yet. Not while the sky still threatens to snow. The mast creaks above you, a towering dark spine against the pale sky. The sail hangs limp for now, half frozen, crusted with frost that sparkles faintly in the dull morning light. You remember the last time you saw it full, straining against the wind, snapping with power. Now it looks tired, like the rest of you. You sit up slowly, every joint stiff. The movement sends a shiver through your chest. Beneath your cloak, you're wearing layers of wool and linen, all of them damp. The sea doesn't care how much you wear. It always finds a way in. You brush a thin layer of ice from your beard and blink the salt out of your eyes. Your lips are split and rough. Talking hurts. Most of the men don't bother anymore unless it's necessary. There's nothing new to say, and the cold steals the will to speak. You look around. The crew is a blur of shapes, huddled beneath cloaks and furs. Some are curled against the gunwales, others lying flat between the oar benches, heads resting on shields or sacks. A few are already awake, rubbing their hands, checking the rigging, spitting into the wind. The helmsman stands at the stern, wrapped in layers that make him look twice his size. His beard is stiff with frost. He doesn't shiver. He never does. The smell of salt and sweat mixes with smoke from a small iron pot, glowing faintly red near the mast. Someone managed to keep a few coals alive overnight. It's the closest thing to fire you're allowed out here. An open flame would be suicide on a wooden ship, but those dull embers mean everything. They're passed around carefully, nestled in a small clay bowl, used to light a torch or warm a pair of hands before being covered again. You watch a man hold his fingers above them, eyes half closed, a tiny sigh escaping his lips. It's the only luxury anyone will get today. The cold is constant, but the wet makes it worse. Your boots are soaked, your cloak damp, your tunic clings to your back like wet parchment. The sea mist never leaves. It sits on your skin, on your clothes, even in your beard. A film of salt that glitters in the dim light. Your breath rises in thin plumes, mixing with everyone else's, forming a low fog that hangs just above the deck. It smells of men, oil, and exhaustion. You reach for your water flask, but it's half frozen. You shake it, hear the slosh of thick ice against the sides, and take a sip anyway. It burns your teeth and makes you cough. You remember warmer mornings, ones with a hearth, the smell of bread, a blanket that didn't smell like wet animal. But those memories are dangerous out here. They make the cold worse somehow. They remind you of what you don't have. The sea doesn't care. It heaves beneath you, slow and heavy. The long ship rises with it, then drops again, the motion sending a dull ache through your stomach. You've gotten used to it mostly. The first few nights were worse. Constant nausea, every bite of food threatening to come back up. Now it's just part of you. The roll of the ship matches the rhythm of your pulse. It's like being cradled by something ancient and uncaring. Someone sneezes behind you. Another coughs, deep and rattling. Illness spreads fast here. You've seen men waste away in a week, feverish and shaking, their lips blue long before their hearts stop. There's no medicine, just strong will and stronger drink. The man beside you passes a skin of ale, and you take a mouthful. It's warm from being tucked under his cloak, sour and thick, but it burns enough to make you forget the taste of salt for a moment. The horizon starts to glow faintly. The sun is trying to rise, a pale smear of light pushing through the fog. It doesn't bring warmth, not really, just visibility. The sky turns from black to grey to a washed out blue, and the sea reflects it back like dull metal. You can see the other ships now, a few dark silhouettes scant across the waves. The fleet hasn't broken formation, not yet. You're still heading west, towards something none of you can see, but all of you pretend to believe in. The helmsman grunts, and men begin to move. Oars are lifted, set into place. You pull yourself up, your knees protesting. The frost cracks beneath your boots as you shuffle toward your position. The cold bites harder now that you're standing. The wind has teeth, sharp and constant. It cuts through every layer of fabric, finds every gap in your clothing, and settles there. You grip the oar, the wood rough and familiar beneath your palms. Sleep was brief and cruel. You can feel it still clinging to you, that heavy fog behind your eyes, the way your thoughts drag. You didn't dream. Or maybe you did, but they were the kind of dreams that fade before you can remember them. You only know that for a few hours, the cold stopped biting and the world went quiet. That's all that matters. Out here, sleep isn't rest. It's truce. You close your eyes, surrender to exhaustion, and hope the sea shows mercy. The call goes out, low but firm, and the oars hit the water in unison. The ship lurches forward, slicing through the grey waves. The motion rocks you back into rhythm. Your breath comes out in short bursts, timed with each pull. You can feel the muscles in your shoulders stretch, burn, tighten. Around you no one speaks. The only sounds are the creak of the ship, the slap of water, and the dull grunt of effort. Minutes blur into hours. The light doesn't change much. Just a little brighter grey against a darker grey. Sometimes snow drifts down, small flakes that melt as soon as they touch the deck. Other times it's just mist, the kind that hides the horizon and makes you feel like you're rowing inside a cloud. You think about land, about the feel of dry soil under your boots, about the heat of a fire you don't have to hide from the wind. But land feels like something from another life. Right now, this ship is your world. 30 men, one hull, and an ocean determined to break it. You shift your weight, glance down at the space where you slept. It's still damp, your breath still fogging above it. You'll be back there again tonight, curled under that same stiff cloak, fighting for another few hours of half sleep. It's not comfort you're chasing, it's survival. The wind picks up, rattling the sail and sending a spray of icy water across the deck. It hits your face, cold enough to sting, but it keeps you awake. You keep rowing. The man beside you mutters something about home, about how the gods must be laughing. You don't answer. You just pull harder. Because the only thing worse than rowing through this endless sea is stopping and realising how far from everything you really are. The light fades again, faster than you expect. Day and night don't mean much out here, just cycles of grey. When darkness comes, it's almost a relief. You'll stop rowing soon, cover yourself in frozen furs again, and pretend to sleep while the sea hums its endless song beneath you. The waves will keep rocking you. The cold will keep whispering. And for a few hours, you'll drift between waking and dreaming, somewhere between the living and the drowned, waiting for another dawn that looks exactly like the last. You start to realise that the ship you're on isn't just transportation. It's everything. It's a floating world built out of oak and iron nails, shaped by hands that understood both the sea and the stubbornness required to fight it. Every inch of it groans and flexes with the waves. Every plank seems to breathe, and every sound echoes through the wood like a heartbeat. The Viking longship isn't a vessel of comfort. It's a test of endurance that doubles as a coffin waiting for the right moment. You look around in the grey daylight, and the size of it always surprises you. Long, narrow, open to the air, maybe 70 feet from prow to stern. The sides rise barely high enough to keep the water out. There's no deck house, no sleeping quarters, nowhere to hide from the wind. The only shelter is what you can make yourself. A cloak pulled tight, a fur stretched across a pile of ropes, or, if you're lucky, a low canvas tent rigged between oars. Everything else is exposure. The longship isn't built for rest. It's built for movement, for speed, for slicing through water like a blade through flesh. You run your hand along the gunwale, the wood rough beneath the salt crust. Every piece of it was shaped by an axe, not a saw. You can still feel the marks, each one left by some craftsman back in a fjordside workshop months ago. He probably froze his hands, carving the same curves that now cut the sea. The ship feels alive because it was made that way. Curved hull, overlapping planks, tarred seams that expand when wet. It's both simple and genius, a product of desperation and precision. You think about the men who built it and wonder if they ever imagined someone sleeping on it, shivering beneath a crust of ice. You can't walk more than a few steps without stepping on someone's possessions. Coiled ropes, water barrels, spears bundled together, shields hung along the sides. Everything doubles as something else. A shield is protection during battle, a windbreak while sleeping. A chest stores gear by day and supports a man's head by night. There's no wasted space, no personal territory. Everyone shares everything, including the smell. When the ship moves, you move with it. The rhythm of the waves gets into your body until you can't tell if the sway comes from outside or inside you. You stop fighting it. The longship has its own logic, its own pulse. If you stand wrong, it throws you. If you move wrong, it punishes you. Every Viking learns that early. Balance isn't a skill, it's survival. You've seen new men stumble, knock a bucket, and spill precious drinking water into the sea. They're cursed for it until the next mistake belongs to someone else. The longship has no privacy, no real silence, just layers of noise stacked on top of each other. The creak of timbers, the splash of oars, the wind slapping against the sail, the cough of a man half asleep, the dull thump of a hammer tightening a loose iron band. It all blends into a soundscape that never stops. At first, it's maddening. Then it becomes background, a constant reminder that you're still alive because the ship still breathes. When the sea is calm, which isn't often, men sprawl where they can. They unbuckle belts, stretch their legs, lean against shields. Some close their eyes, not to sleep, but to rest their eyelids from the glare off the water. You learn to sleep in fragments. 10 minutes here, 20 there. Broken pieces of rest stitched together like the planks beneath you. Sometimes a shout or a shift in wind tears you back awake before you've even realised you drifted off. There are no soft edges. The wood digs into your hips, your shoulders, your ribs. You've tried folding your cloak, using it as padding, but it always ends up soaked again. The cold climbs through the boards, through your skin, until you stop noticing the difference between the wood and your bones. You start to think that if you ever stepped off this ship, you'd still feel it moving beneath your feet. The sway becomes permanent, a ghost that lingers in your muscles. You think about home sometimes, about the houses with turf roofs and smoke that rises instead of smothers. But this ship is your home now. The men around you are your walls, your family, your alarm clock. You've seen them in every state possible. Furious, freezing, vomiting, praying. There's no pretense here. The sea strips everything down to what's real. Out here, you either pull your weight or you become dead weight. And no one carries that for long. The man nearest you is mending a line. His fingers move slowly, stiff from cold, threading hemp through an iron ring. His knuckles are swollen, the skin cracked. He doesn't complain. No one does. Complaints don't change the wind, they just waste air. You've learned that too. Instead, there's a kind of quiet cooperation, wordless and automatic. Someone moves aside so another can reach the water barrel. Someone tosses a cloak over a sleeping man when the spray hits him full in the face. It's not kindness exactly. It's maintenance. The ship needs its crew to function, and every man knows that without the others, he'd be food for gulls by morning. When the weather turns bad, the long ship becomes a trap. The sail is hauled down, the oars tied off, and everyone huddles in place while the waves hammer from every direction. You brace your legs against a beam and try to stay upright while water sloshes across the floor. It's ice cold, creeping under your clothes, soaking everything it touches. The sound of the sea changes then, no longer a steady slap, but a constant roar, like being inside a throat that's always screaming. You can't speak over it. You can't think past it. You just endure. The rain doesn't fall. It attacks. It hits your face sideways, stinging like grit. You pull your hood forward, press your forehead against your knees, and hope the gods are in a forgiving mood. Some men mutter prayers to Odin, others to Christ. You don't know which one listens. Maybe neither. The ship tilts hard, and you hear a shout as a barrel breaks loose, rolling toward the stern. It slams into a man's leg with a dull crack. He curses once, then goes silent. No one moves to check on him right away. Not until the sea calms enough to make it worth the risk. When the worst of it passes, you bail. Everyone bails. Buckets, helmets, even shields turned upside down. Anything that can move water. You scoop and toss until your arms burn, the deck slowly clearing, the longship rising higher as it sheds the weight. No one keeps count of how many storms they've survived. It's not the kind of thing you brag about. Survival is expected, not celebrated. Sometimes, between storms, the sea goes glassy, the wind dies, the sail droops, and the ship just drifts. Those moments are stranger than the chaos. Too quiet, too still. You can hear the creak of leather as someone shifts, the crunch of dried fish between teeth, the distant call of seabirds that might be miles away. The stillness doesn't feel like peace. It feels like waiting for punishment. You know the wind will come back. It always does. When night falls, the ship transforms again. The horizon disappears. The water and sky merge into one endless black surface, broken only by the faint gleam of stars when the clouds part. You can't see the men beside you, only hear them breathing. You lie down in the same damp hollow you left that morning, your body fitting into the impression it made in the boards. The cold settles like a blanket. The wind slides across the deck, lifting edges of cloaks, finding skin. You curl tighter, drawing your knees to your chest, trying to trap whatever warmth you can create. The sounds at night are different. The sea loses its shape. You hear slapping water, faint creaks, a rope snapping somewhere, a man whispering in his sleep. Someone snores. Someone else mutters in another language. You stare at the mast above, barely visible against the dark, and imagine it stretching forever into the sky. Sometimes the stars move faster than your thoughts. You try to count them, but the ship shifts and they vanish. You've been told that Vikings weren't afraid of the sea, that they saw it as a road instead of a barrier. Maybe that's true when the weather is good and the wind is kind, but out here in the middle of winter, it feels less like a road and more like a judgment. Every creak of the hull reminds you that you're only a few inches of wood away from the coldest grave imaginable. And yet, despite that, you sleep. Not because it's comfortable, but because you have to. When the helmsman calls a change in direction, you stir. The rudder groans as it's shifted. The sail catches a new angle of wind, and the longship leans into it like a living thing. You can feel the tension ripple through the wood. It's in those moments that the ship feels most alive. Not when it's still, but when it's fighting. You realise that everyone on board has the same rhythm now, the same heartbeat, the same breath. The longship isn't just carrying you, it's consuming you, moulding you into part of itself. The man beside you turns, pulling his fur tighter. His breath fogs in the dark. He mutters something you can't make out, then goes still again. You close your eyes, trying to follow him into sleep, but your body resists. The cold keeps finding you. The rocking keeps nudging you awake. You drift instead, hovering in that half place between rest and awareness, where dreams and waves overlap. In that strange suspension, the ship feels less like wood and more like pulse. You can almost believe it's breathing beneath you. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. The men groan softly, already knowing what comes next. You don't bother opening your eyes. You just adjust your cloak, brace your body, and wait for the next round of wind to arrive. The longship shudders, readying itself, and you move with it automatically. The day starts again before it's even ended. The sea never pauses long enough to tell the difference. You thought you knew cold. You didn't. The cold out here isn't a number on a winter forecast or a quick shiver before you duck back inside. It's a thing with weight and hands. It takes your fingers first, then your toes, then it goes looking for anything soft enough to bully. It keeps score. You feel it before you're fully awake, a slow bite along your cheekbones and the inside of your nose, the kind of sting that makes your eyes water, even when you're not sad about anything. Your breath fogs and instantly crusts your moustache with frost that sticks like tiny hooks. When you inhale through your mouth, your teeth ache as though someone is tapping them with a spoon, one by one, checking for weak spots. If there were any luxury in this, you'd choose not to breathe. Unfortunately, that's not on the table. You try to rub warmth into your hands. It doesn't work. The skin is past the point where friction helps. Your palms feel like badly cured leather left in the snow. You stick your hands under your armpits and count to 30, then 50, then 100. By the time feeling returns, the ship takes a wave and throws another sheet of cold water across the deck that finds your wrists and slides down inside your sleeves. It's not dramatic. No scream, no gasp. Just a quiet curse through clenched teeth and a small adjustment of your cloak. Because everyone is watching and no one is watching, and you still have to look like you belong here. The cold has layers you didn't know existed. There's the air cold that needles the surfaces. There's the wet cold that creeps under every seam and pretends to be your friend right up until it steals your motor skills. There's the wood cold that rises from the planks and settles in your joints like someone poured gravel into your elbows and knees. And then there's the deep cold, the one that takes its time and waits for you to make a mistake. That's the cold that gets men killed, not with drama, but with small, stupid choices. The glove you take off to fix a knot because it's faster that way. The hood you push back for 5 minutes because it's blocking your view. The boot you loosen because your toes started to throb. And you thought more space would help. It never helps. The cold is patient. It will wait for you to be in a hurry. You check your toes by wiggling them. Nothing. That's not news. You haven't felt your toes properly since the second night out. Feeling comes and goes in a cycle that has nothing to do with circulation and everything to do with hope. Numb, sting, burn, ache, numb again. That's the rhythm. You stomp a little and pretend it does something. The truth is, you're counting on movement to keep your feet attached to you. Rowing helps. Bailing helps. Even standing and shifting your weight from heel to forefoot again and again becomes a ritual that passes for strategy. You've watched older men on these voyages, the ones who've made the crossing more times than is probably sensible. They move constantly. Even when they're still, they're not still. Calves flexing under wool, fingers drumming on a shield rim, teeth working a piece of leather. Everything is a pump. Everything is circulation. The clothing is your entire plan and your entire problem. Layers of linen and wool under a cloak with fur that was impressive back on land, and now just smells like a damp barn floor. Dry is a fantasy. You're aiming for less wet than yesterday. You pull the cloak tighter and feel the stiffness of salt in the fibres. It crackles when you move. Wool does its best. It keeps you alive despite being soaked. But there's a limit to how much it can bully physics. The wind finds the seams, and the spray does the rest. Your belt is your anchor. It holds everything together and gives you something to pull against when the ship heaves. You slid your knife closer to the buckle in the night so your belly could warm it by accident. There's no romance in that. It's just one less shock when your fingers need to use it. Breath is a negotiation. You try your nose first, but the air knifes through the hairs and turns the inside of your nostrils into brittle shells that crack when you switch to mouth breathing without thinking. You pull your cloak up over your chin and let your own air bounce back at you. It fogs your face, coats your eyelashes. Blink too slow and they try to stick. You learn to blink like a metronome. Too fast and you dry your eyes. Too slow and you stick them shut. Out here, even blinking has a technique. You don't talk much because talking costs heat. Words are warm little gifts that the wind snatches away. The helmsman uses his voice the way a miser uses coins. Short, precise, necessary. An angle, a name, a curse when someone fumbles. You answer with nods and small grunts. You save your mouth for swallowing. Ale, mostly. Water turns mean in the cold and takes forever to unfreeze. Ale behaves. It doesn't warm you in any lasting way. Nothing does. But it puts a small fire in your throat and convinces your brain you've done something useful. That illusion is worth more than the drink. You look at the young man across from you. His cheeks raw. His eyes glassy with that faraway look new sailors get when their bodies are quietly arguing with the situation. He has the overconfident posture of someone who still believes in quick fixes. His gloves are off as he fumbles with a strap. You can see his fingers, red and wrong. You want to tell him to put them back on, to use his teeth, to ask for help, to do anything but what he's doing. You don't say a word. Not because you don't care, but because he wouldn't listen. No one listens until the lesson is theirs. 5 minutes later, he drops the strap, stuffs his hands under his arms, and starts the jaw clench and shoulder hunch routine you've learned by heart. He'll pretend it's fine. You'll pretend you didn't notice. That's the agreement. Every so often, a gust cuts through the crew, and you hear the same involuntary sound, not quite a moan, not quite a growl. Cold makes men honest. The bravado thins out in the dark hours. No one is composing epics about this part. There are no songs about trying to pee over the side, while a crosswind threatens to make it the worst decision of your life. There's only shuffling and practical silence, and the constant mental inventory. Fingers, okay. Toes, questionable. Nose, attached. Ears, burning now, good. Thighs, heavy and damp. Mind, still yours mostly. Night changes the shape of cold. Daylight brings a thin promise. You can see your misery. You can measure it in distances and faces and the height of the wave you didn't quite dodge. In the dark, you measure by breath counts and the scrape of a rope you know by feel because you've heard it every hour for a week. The cold seems to thicken after sunset, like the air took the same oath as the men and decided to work harder. You curl smaller, tucking your hands between your thighs. Shoulders turned in, forehead pressed to the inside of your hood, so your breath has a chance to circle back. The wood beneath you holds the day's failure to be warm. Your hip finds the same knot in the plank and complains. You move half an inch. The knot follows. Cold teaches you that comfort is a rumour. Frost forms on anything that pretends to be still. The oar handles bloom, a thin white film that looks gentle and feels like sandpaper on your palms. You scrape it off without thinking, only to have it grow back on the next watch. Shield rims sparkle like they belong in a different story, one with feasts and songs and people who can feel their ears. You catch yourself staring at the crystals the way you used to stare at a fire, hunting for meanings that aren't there. They're just proof that the ship and the air in your breath are conspiring to remind you who's in charge. You learn the timing of the waves the way you learn to walk as a child. It's not knowledge, It's muscle memory. The sea gives you a beat and punishes you if you guess wrong. Step too early and your knee takes a twist it can't afford. Step too late and your shin finds the edge of a bench that was designed by a man who thought human legs were optional. Cold makes you clumsy. Clumsy makes you wet. Wet makes you colder. That loop is the real enemy. You break it by being boring. Slow hands, deliberate feet. The kind of caution that looks like laziness until you realise the laziest man on the ship is usually the one who hasn't turned blue yet. Food helps until it doesn't. Dried fish with the texture of rope, barley cakes that pretend to be bread, a smear of fat you ration like you're feeding a pet mouse. The fat is the currency. A mouthful spread across a hunk of something tasteless buys you an hour where your core doesn't shiver so hard your teeth click. You try not to think about warm stew or ovens or anything that involves heat that stays where you put it. The cold listens for thoughts like that and takes them personally. Sometimes snow arrives quiet, as if the sky forgot how to be cruel for a minute and settled on being merely inconvenient. It dusts your cloak and sits on your hood and pretends to be a blanket until your own heat turns it into water and your cloak turns it into a problem. Other times it needles sideways, riding the wind in a way that finds the gap between your collar and your neck, no matter how you turtle down. You hunch lower and look like everyone else. Lumps of dark cloth dotted white, arranged carefully along the length of a narrow boat, pretending sleep is happening because the alternative is admitting it isn't. Men talk about iron as though it's the standard of toughness. Iron rings, iron holds an edge, iron bites back if you touch it wrong. Out here, iron is just another victim. Knives stiffen with frost, so that the first cut of the day feels like you're asking a stubborn animal to work. Buckles go rigid and claim they've never heard of holes. Rivets sweat rust. Even the nails look tired. The phrase that lives in your head now is simple. If iron complains, what chance do you have? You answer yourself the same way every time. Keep moving. You develop tricks that aren't really tricks. You slap your thighs when no one is looking. You roll your shoulders until the tendons stop feeling like they were strung by an enemy. You pull your hood forward, then back, then forward again like you're negotiating with the wind. You stand on one foot to wake a calf, and then stand on the other, and pretend it was part of a plan. You put a warm stone in your mitten when someone thinks to heat one by the ember pan, and you act like it's no big deal while your eyes betray you. Small heat is enormous. No one says thank you out loud. Everyone says it in the way they pass the stone along a minute later, even though their hand is not done with it. You watch for the colour of skin because cold has a palette no one wants to wear. Normal is flushed and ugly and alive. Bad is white around the edges. Worse is waxy. Worst is that pale grey that belongs on dead fish, and the faces of drunks who fell asleep in snowbanks. When you see that on a man's fingers, you swear at him softly and shove his hand somewhere warm and threaten to break his nose if he pulls away. He snarls and does as he's told, and then glares at you for 20 minutes, because anger helps. You glare back because you need us to. And a ship teaches discipline by force. You put things away where they belong, not because you're neat, but because the extra seconds you'll spend looking for a dropped glove are the seconds that let the wet cold finish what it started. You tie things twice. You rehearse small motions in your head before your hands attempt them, because cold turns fingers into slow students who need clear instructions. Your knife sheath is exactly where it should be. Your spare wool cap is inside your cloak, not under it, because under it is an invitation for water to RSVP. You sleep with your belt on. You sleep with your boots near. You sleep like someone who expects to be woken by a problem. Exhaustion makes the cold louder. When you've rowed for hours and bailed for more, and stared at the fog until you're convinced it's staring back, the cold starts a whisper campaign in your skull. Sit down, it says. Close your eyes for a minute, it says. Just rest your back against the shield and let your chin fall. You've earned it. The voice is convincing and always wrong. You answer by moving. You stand when you want to sit. You talk when silence starts to feel like a blanket. You force a joke that isn't funny, about your feet applying for release from service, and the man next to you grunts and gives you half a smile that looks like a cracked mug. It's enough. Your brain backs away from the edge. The smell of cold is a contradiction. People think cold has no smell. It does. It has the sharpness of water that doesn't want to be water anymore. It has the sourness of wool that tried and failed to dry. It has the tin tang of blood from a split lip that never gets a chance to heal. And over everything, the salt. It dries on your skin and makes everything sting like you've been shaved with a dull blade. You lick your lips and taste ocean and regret. There are moments when the sun pretends to remember its job. It doesn't warm you, not really, but it lifts the colour out of the sky and throws a thin gold across the planks that fools your eyes into believing in temperature. Men angle their faces toward it like lizards. They shut their eyes and don't smile because smiling leaks heat, but their mouths loosen. You use those minutes like they won't come back, because sometimes they don't. The same weather that gave you a bright noon can give you snow by afternoon, an ice mist by evening, and none of it cares whether you were ready. You've heard people talk about getting used to the cold. That's not what happens. What happens is you get used to the decisions the cold forces on you. You stop arguing with the wind. You stop trusting your memory for how warm things felt yesterday. You learn to treat every hour like a new problem set that looks just like the last one, but has a different trick in the middle. You stop dreaming about fires. You start dreaming about dry socks, which is worse because dry socks are closer to possible and therefore more cruel. There's always one man who tries to be heroic about it. He takes off his hood in a gust to prove something to nobody. He rolls his sleeves for 5 minutes of work, and then spends 30 trying to convince his fingers they still belong to him. He laughs too loud at the cold, as if it understands the joke. The ship fixes that fast. A wave hits him square. He goes to one knee. 3 hands grab him without comment and set him back where he should be. He pulls his hood up and keeps it there. Lesson learned. No speech required. When sleep comes, it doesn't so much arrive as ambush you. You're not comfortable. You're not ready. You haven't earned it, and you don't deserve it, and you take it anyway, because it's the only mercy available. You curl into yourself and make your body as small as it can be without becoming a problem for your lungs. You put your face in your hood, your hands on your belly, your knees to your chest, and you let the cold push against the edges of you while you focus on the small, warm circle you've made. You measure your breaths and let the ship's roll rub your thoughts smooth. When the spray hits, you flinch and swear, and then you go back to the counting. You're not asleep exactly. You're paused. Waking is not dramatic either. You don't sit up with a start. You don't stretch like a cat and greet the dawn as if you ordered it. You uncurl in segments, interrogating each part for usability. Ankles, present, non-compliant. Knees, resentful. Hips, older than they were last night. Back, a slab of board that has strong opinions about your life choices. Hands, strangers at first, then acquaintances. Face, raw, brain, reluctant employee. You reassemble yourself into a useful shape and join the living and pretend the cold hasn't been gnawing at you the entire time you were gone. There are small victories. A dry patch under your cloak that stayed dry. A glove that didn't stiffen into a claw overnight. A moment at the ember pan where you pretend you're warming your knife for practical reasons while you actually let the heat lick your knuckles. A shared swallow of something strong that lights a candle inside your chest for 60 honest seconds. You stack these like coins. They don't buy much, but they keep your hands busy and your mind pointed forward. Sometimes, out of nowhere, a gull appears and rides the air above the ship, like it's not even trying. It looks down at you with the vacant approval of a creature that has never owned a boot or a plan. You hate it and love it. It smells like land from 50 miles away. The cold feels different for one breath. Not warmer. It never does that. Just less permanent. Someone mutters that it's a good sign. Someone else mutters that it means nothing. Both are true. The sea will decide when you get a break. The sea will decide when you don't. You adjust your hood again, flex your hands, and take your place on the bench, because that's what the longship asks, and because doing is warmer than thinking. The oar slides into the water with a sound you've started to like. You pull, your shoulders complain, then agree. The blade bites, and the boat answers with a shove that says movement is still possible. The wind chews your cheek in the same place it always does, and you move your scarf a finger's width, and it helps a little. The helmsman calls a low word that means stay with it. You do. The cold presses, steady as a debt collector. You pay an effort and minutes and small adjustments that look ridiculous to anyone who isn't here. The ship keeps going. You keep going with it because there isn't an alternative that makes sense, and because the next part of the day is already lining up whether you're ready or not. You stop thinking about warmth as something you can find. Out here, it's something you borrow. Everything you do, how you sit, where you lie, who you end up beside, is about trading body heat like a currency that never lasts long enough. The longship doesn't give you shelter. It gives you men. Dozens of bodies packed close in the hollow belly of a wooden animal that groans through the waves. Each body is a furnace burning too low to survive alone. Together they make a small, unreliable miracle. You've been awake long enough to feel the air shift. The wind cut sharper tonight, the kind that finds every gap in your clothing and laughs its way through. The sea spray has started to freeze before it hits the deck, turning the boards into slick glass that catches the dim light of the moon. The ropes look like twisted icicles. Every surface you touch feels like it might fuse to your skin. You pull your cloak tighter, though it barely matters. The fur has gone hard, crusted with salt and frost, stiff as old parchment. It makes a sound when you move, a brittle crackle that everyone can hear. There's a rhythm to bedding down on a Viking ship. It's not a routine, it's a negotiation. You pick a spot near the midsection if you can. Less spray, less wind, a little more stability. The veterans always take those places first, and you don't argue. You crawl into what's left. Your bed is the same fur you wore during the day, maybe doubled if you're lucky, laid across a pile of sailcloth or rope to keep the worst of the damp off. The ropes dig into your shoulder blades. You learn to shift without complaining. The men settle in around you. Some pull off their boots, others don't bother. The air fills with the smell of sweat, tar, and wet wool. Someone nearby sneezes, the sound startling in the quiet. Nobody blesses him. The gods have bigger problems. You roll onto your side and press your knees up under your cloak. The air inside the small tent of fabric warms a little, enough to breathe without your nose stinging. You share that small warmth with the man beside you, whose cloak overlaps yours. It's not affection, it's math. 2 bodies mean 2 chances of surviving the night. You can hear breathing all around you. Heavy, uneven, wet with exhaustion. Some men snore. Some mumble through half dreams about food, or women, or home. One man grinds his teeth so hard it sounds like a saw on bone. The noise becomes a kind of lullaby, rough but steady. You breathe in when they breathe out. The air is thick with it, the smell of lungs and salt and life. You could almost imagine the ship itself breathing with you, exhaling mist that fogs the air until you can't tell where one body's breath ends and another's begins. The fur itches your neck, but you don't dare scratch. You'd have to expose your hand. You keep everything tucked in. The trick isn't to get warm, it's to keep from getting colder. The cloak traps your breath, your sweat, your smell. It feels like a prison, and a lifeline at once. Sometimes you wonder if you'd be warm and naked, but that's a fantasy for a different kind of misery. Wool scratches, but it also saves. Frost creeps in from the edges. You can feel it forming on your boots, on the exposed edge of your cloak, on the hair near your temples. You blow out a slow breath, trying to push the cold back. It doesn't work. The frost just keeps spreading, beautiful and cruel. You reach out and brush it away, and your glove comes back wet. The man beside you shifts closer. You feel the heat of his shoulder through the layers, faint but there. You don't speak. You just stay like that, sharing enough warmth to make the night slightly less unbearable. Every once in a while someone gets up. A shift change. A cough that won't stop. A bladder that won't wait. You hear the shuffle of boots. The muttered curse. The slap of cold air rushing into the small bubble of body heat you've built. The cold fills the gap instantly, reclaiming space. When the man lies back down, it takes long minutes for the warmth to return. You measure time by that cycle. Warmth leaving. Warmth rebuilding. Hours don't exist. Only the distance between shivers. Your blanket smells like everything you've done since you left shore. Salt, smoke, sweat, the faint hang of dried fish. There's no way to clean it. You shake it out sometimes when the weather's dry, but that only rearranges the dirt. You've stopped caring. The smell means you're still alive. You've smelled worse on the dead. The fur was once reindeer, or maybe sheep, depending on what you could trade or steal. The hair still clings in patches, matted and rough, brittle at the tips. It doesn't drape, it breaks. When the wind hits just right, it sounds like dry grass moving. You pull it up over your face and breathe through it. The smell of animal oil fills your nose, heavy and rank. It's unpleasant, but the air inside the fur feels thicker, heavier, warmer. You keep it there. You think about home again. Not about comfort, just comparison. You remember a bed stuffed with straw that at the time seemed miserable but now feels like a dream. You remember firelight that didn't come from burning pitch or stolen coals. You remember the smell of wood smoke that didn't sting your throat. Those memories drift in and out of your head like slow waves. You let them, as long as they don't hurt too much. The night feels longer out here. The stars don't move fast enough. You can't tell how much time has passed since you last blinked. The sea makes its own clock, and it never agrees with yours. Sometimes you wake up convinced hours have gone by, only to realise you never actually slept. The rhythm of the waves tricks you. They rock you in and out of half dreams where you're warm, where the deck is steady, where the sound of creaking wood turns into the groan of a bed frame in some other lifetime. You wake from those dreams angry at the betrayal of your own mind. There are no fires on the longship, not really. A few glowing embers in an iron pot, barely enough to warm a hand, never enough to heat the air. You can see the faint red pulse of it from where you lie. Men drift toward it during their watches, cupping their hands, whispering to the glow as if it were alive. You understand the impulse. Fire feels like a god here. Not one of the old ones that demands blood, but a small kind one that gives just enough to keep you believing in survival. Someone rolls over and bumps your leg. You grunt. He mutters an apology in a voice so low it might have been a dream. You shift to make room. The movement lets in a thin blade of cold that cuts through your blanket and lands straight on your stomach. You pull the fur tighter. Your muscles spasm from the shock, then settle into a dull ache. You focus on your breathing again, syncing it with the rhythm of the sea. In, out, creak, splash. The pattern works better than any prayer. You think about the word blanket. It means protection, but that's generous. What you have is a compromise. A layer between your skin and a world that wants it. A fur isn't soft, it's armour against air. You start to understand why Vikings valued cloaks more than gold. Gold can't keep you alive when the sea freezes in your beard. A good cloak can. You'd trade 10 treasures for one dry pelt right now. The man on your other side shifts, his breath steady and warm against the back of your neck. It's strange how quickly you stop caring about space. On land, this kind of closeness would feel awkward. Here it feels necessary. You'd sleep pressed against a goat if it meant one less shiver. You've done worse. Everyone here has. Out on the open sea, modesty froze to death before the first week was over. The sound of the wind changes. It gets lower, heavier. You feel it in the wood more than you hear it. The ship leans slightly, the ropes groaning in response. A few men stir, but don't sit up. The motion is familiar now, almost comforting. The sea is restless, but it's your rest too. When it moves, you move with it. When it stops, you wake. Stillness feels wrong. Stillness means something broke. You rub at your face, feeling the roughness of salt and stubble. Your fingers are clumsy. You find the edge of your blanket and pull it higher again. The fur brushes your lips, dry and cracked. You can taste the salt there, the same salt that coats everything you own. You wonder if it's in your blood now. Probably. The sea leaves a mark you don't wash off. Somewhere near the stern, someone hums. A low, tuneless sound, more vibration than melody. It's too soft to recognise, but enough to make the air change. The others don't stop him. The sound drifts across the deck, weaving through the sleeping bodies, mixing with the creaks and sighs. It's not a song of bravery or longing. It's just a sound that keeps the dark from feeling endless. You find yourself humming too, so quietly that even you can barely hear it. The shared sound fills the cracks between breaths. When you finally drift, you don't dream about warmth. You dream about balance. You dream that you're standing on the deck. The sea perfectly calm. The sky full of steady stars. You dream that you're not cold, but you're not warm either. You're just there, breathing without effort. The dream doesn't last. It never does. You wake with the same ache in your joints, the same layer of frost on your hood, the same damp fur clinging to your chest. But for a few seconds, your body doesn't hurt. You cling to that. The dawn is only a rumour when men start moving again. Someone sits up, shakes his cloak, mutters about the wind. Someone else reaches for the bailer. You pull yourself upright and blink through the dim light. The sea looks almost solid, thick with small chunks of ice. The air bites at your nose like it's personally offended that you survived the night. You rub your arms and exhale through your hands. The breath fogs, drifts upward, and vanishes. You fold your blanket in half, slap it against the bench to break off the frost, and drape it over your shoulders. It's heavier now, but that's part of the deal. Every night adds weight. Every morning you carry it. You look around at the others, faces pale, eyes red, beards stiff with ice. They look like statues carved from winter itself. You probably look the same. You share a glance with the man next to you. No words. Just the same small nod that means, we're still here. You both turn back to the oars. The day begins like it always does. With motion, with work, with the sea pretending to be merciful for an hour before reminding you what it can do. The blankets are folded, the breath is spent, and the frost is already returning. You grip the oar, feel the sting of frozen wood through your gloves, and row. The warmth you shared in the night is gone, scattered into the sky with the mist of your breath. But for now, the ship moves, and that's enough to make you forget that you'll need to borrow that warmth again before long. You don't lie down on a Viking longship expecting peace. You lie down expecting to survive the hours until dawn. There's no such thing as privacy, and the word quiet means something else entirely. Sleeping among warriors is a compromise between exhaustion and vigilance. Everyone's armed, everyone's sore, and everyone's dreaming of land that doesn't move. But the sea doesn't stop to let you rest. It keeps talking in its deep, endless voice. A low conversation between waves and wood that never includes you. You just try not to fall out of the story it's telling. When night comes, the men spread themselves along the benches and between the oars, a tangle of limbs, shields and cloaks. It's not order, it's instinct. The veterans choose the spots near the middle of the ship, where the rocking is less cruel and the spray less punishing. The younger ones end up near the bow or stern, places that buck and sway like angry animals. No one argues about it. The sea decides, not rank. You step over legs and weapons, searching for a gap wide enough to curl into. You find one wedged between a coil of rope and a barrel that leaks the faint smell of salted fish. It's good enough. Everything here is good enough until it isn't. You drop your cloak over yourself, push the edge under your shoulder to block the wind, and settle into the noise. It's everywhere. The slap of water against the hull, the sigh of the rope straining with the wind, the dull thud of an oar that wasn't tied down tightly enough. The wood beneath you creaks in long, tired stretches, bending but not breaking. Every sound becomes part of your heartbeat. You start to measure time, not by stars or sun, but by rhythm. A creak, a breath, a wave, a shift. Your body learns the pattern and fills the gaps with tiny dreams that don't last. Someone beside you stirs. A massive shape in the half-dark. He grunts, rolls onto his side, and mumbles something that might be a prayer, or just a complaint to no one. His beard brushes your arm. You don't move. Waking him would be worse than enduring it. A sleeping Viking is still half ready for battle, and surprise isn't a game you want to play with a man who sleeps beside a blade. You keep still, staring at the dark, waiting for him to sink back into silence. The smell is impossible to ignore. Sweat, salt, pitch, wet leather. Smoke from a torch that burned out hours ago. The faint iron tang of blood from a cut that never really healed. The air feels thick enough to chew. You pull your cloak tighter, but the smell seeps in anyway. It's the smell of work, of survival, of men who have been alive too long in the wrong conditions. You stop noticing it after a while, or maybe you just become part of it. Either way, it's home now. Someone snores, a rough, wet sound that rises and falls with the rocking of the ship. Another man answers unconsciously, his snore finding a strange rhythm with the first, like they're competing for air. It should be funny, but you're too tired for humour. You close your eyes, let the sound blur into the rest of the night, and focus on not freezing. You can feel the damp creeping into your clothes again. It always does. The air out here is made of water, and you're just another thing for it to soak. You've learned to sleep with one hand on your weapon. Not out of paranoia, just habit. A ship like this is too small for real danger to sneak up unnoticed, but the rule is the same everywhere. You don't let go of what might keep you alive. Your fingers rest against the hilt, cold metal biting into your skin through the fabric. It's comforting in its own way. Steel doesn't betray you. It just waits. The man across from you coughs, the sound cutting through the rhythm of the waves. He pulls a blanket tighter around his shoulders and mutters something under his breath. You can see the frost in his beard glint faintly when lightning flashes far off to the west. The flash lights up the ship for a split second. Faces half covered in fur, eyes closed, mouths slightly open. Each man in his own small universe of exhaustion. Then darkness again. The image lingers behind your eyes. You close them and pretend you didn't see how fragile everyone looks when they're not pretending to be gods. The deck is never dry. Even when the sea is calm, moisture seeps up from the seams and sticks to everything. The boards are slick, cold, and uneven. You can feel them pressing into your ribs. You shift, but it doesn't help. The cold travels through the wood like a rumour. It reaches you no matter how many layers you wear. You've started to think of it as part of your body. A second pulse, slower, deeper, always there. A gust of wind rattles the shields along the sides of the ship. They clang softly one after another, like a row of bells announcing nothing good. Someone grumbles, kicks a loose plank, and pulls his fur over his head. The noise fades, replaced by the steady splash of the oars dipping in and out of the black water. The men on night watch row in silence, faces hidden beneath hoods, eyes half closed. You can hear the water dripping from each oar blade as it rises, as though the sea itself is sighing. The rhythm is hypnotic, and you fall in and out of it like breathing. You don't dream of land anymore. You dream of the sea, but not as it is. In your dreams, it's quiet, flat, shining like a mirror. You dream of lying on your back, floating, the sky clear. The air still, the ship is gone, the men are gone. There's no sound except your heartbeat. You can't tell if it's a dream of peace or one of death. You wake up every time just before deciding which. You always wake with your hand still on your weapon. There are fights sometimes, not serious ones. Just flashes of frustration that come when the cold and the confinement eat through whatever patience men pretend to have. A shove, a muttered insult, a fist, Then silence again. The sea swallows every argument. You can't hold a grudge when the man who hit you might be the one you lean against to keep warm tomorrow night. You learn to let anger evaporate, like breath in the wind. When the ship pitches hard, bodies roll together. You wake to someone's elbow in your ribs, or a boot pressing against your thigh. You push back gently, both of you half asleep, wordless. There's no room to spread out, so you adapt. You become part of a shifting puzzle of limbs and furs, rearranging with every wave. Once a man rolled too far and nearly went over the side. 3 hands grabbed him before he disappeared. No one spoke after. Everyone just adjusted and went back to pretending to sleep. You've begun to recognise the sound of different kinds of waves. The small slap that means the sea is bored. The heavier crash that means it's thinking about changing moods. The deep, low rumble that comes when something big moves beneath you. Unseen. You tell yourself it's just the current, but part of you remembers the stories. Serpents, whales, things that sleep in the depths and wake when they smell blood. You pull your cloak closer and remind yourself you're already living in a myth. One more monster won't change anything. You open your eyes again when someone shifts beside you. The man's face is inches from yours, his eyes open but not seeing. He's muttering to himself, half dreaming, half awake. You recognise a few words, names, places, maybe a prayer. His breath smells like ale and salt. You turn your head slightly to escape it, but you don't move away. The warmth from his body reaches you in small waves. You let it. Your back aches. Your knees ache. Your eyelids feel like they're made of sand. Every time you start to drift, the ship moves in a new direction and your stomach flips. You swallow hard, breathe through your mouth, and wait for it to settle. You've long since learned that there's no such thing as deep sleep out here. There's only short, stubborn rest between interruptions. You take what you can get. The warriors you share the deck with are the same men who'll stand beside you when land finally appears on the horizon. They're loud, violent, reckless when awake, but in sleep they look almost innocent. You notice the small things, the way one man curls his hands into fists even while dreaming, the way another clutches a small pendant under his cloak, the way they all twitch at the sound of thunder, even though they'd mock fear in daylight. The sea strips everyone down to the same truth. Out here, courage is just endurance that hasn't broken yet. A splash hits the side of the ship, sending a spray of salt water over your face. You lick your lips out of habit and taste the sea again, metallic, bitter, endless. It's in your hair, your clothes, your mouth. You'll never get it out. The sea owns everything. Even the sleep you steal belongs to it. You're just borrowing minutes from something that doesn't believe in mercy. You shift again, tucking your chin deeper into your cloak. You can feel the ship breathing beneath you, the wood flexing with the weight of waves. The sound isn't comforting, but it's familiar. You know this rhythm now. You've slept beside it long enough that it's become part of your body. The sea doesn't care if you rest. It doesn't care if you wake. It just keeps moving. You close your eyes and let it carry you. The cold presses harder as the night deepens. You feel it creeping back into your joints, into your fingers. You press your hands under your cloak and find the rough edge of your tunic, the small heat trapped there. You breathe against your chest, listening to the slow, uneven breathing of the men around you. You think, for a moment, that maybe you've become one creature, all of you together, bound by the same hunger, the same exhaustion, the same salt. A single, shivering body crossing a world that wasn't made for it. The thought fades as your mind slips again. You dream of light flickering through the cracks of the hull, of gulls circling above, of the sound of waves without cold in them. You dream of standing on a beach and not moving. You dream of sleep that doesn't end with a shiver. The ship rocks you toward it, not kindly, but firmly, and for a few hours, the warriors and the sea find a truce. The longship creaks, the salt breathes. You drift somewhere between the two, waiting for the next day to come and remind you that rest, like warmth, never stays for long. The sea never stops talking. You think you've learned its language after weeks of listening, but the North Atlantic doesn't speak so much as it shouts. Endlessly, without pause, without mercy. The roar is constant, so loud and deep that it becomes silence by sheer persistence. It fills your skull, seeps into your bones, and replaces your own thoughts until you can't tell which noises are outside and which ones are in your head. The sound changes with every shift of wind, but it never leaves. It's there when you wake, when you eat, when you try to sleep. It's in the planks beneath you, in the ropes, in your teeth. The waves strike the hull with the slow rhythm of something ancient and angry. The sound like 1,000 fists hitting wood over and over. The air vibrates with it. The longship flexes, groans, adjusts, but it never really resists. It just moves with the punishment, like a beast too stubborn to die. You sit near the bow, pulling your cloak tight, trying to think of something that isn't the sea. But that's the problem. Out here there is no not the sea. There's only grey water below and grey sky above, both endless, both hostile. You remember the silence of land, the crackle of firewood, the sound of your own footsteps in snow, even the rustle of wind through pine branches. Those noises had edges, beginnings and ends. The North Atlantic doesn't have edges. It doesn't start or stop. It just is, like breathing or hunger. The spray stings your face. Every wave that breaks sends a fine mist of salt into the air that coats everything. The deck glistens. Your hair stiffens into icy strands. Your tongue tastes like rust and brine. You can't dry anything. You can only choose what stays wet. You stop noticing after a while. The water becomes part of your skin. You rub your fingers against your palm and feel the thin layer of salt crusting over the calluses. Even your clothes sound different now. The rough wool rasping like sandpaper whenever you move. The wind joins the roar, a high, shrill counterpoint that never rests. It slides past your ears, crawls under your hood, and whips against the sail until it sings. Sometimes it screams, bending the mast until it hums like a bowstring. The pitch changes with the weather, low and heavy before snow, sharp and hollow before rain. You start to read the notes without meaning to. The sea tells you what's coming long before the sky does. When the waves get high, the longship becomes a living creature. It rises and falls in slow, enormous breaths, the prow climbing up one mountain of water before dropping into the next valley. Your stomach drops with it every time. The oarsmen keep time by instinct, pulling harder when the ship climbs, easing when it falls. The rhythm never matches human comfort. It belongs to the ocean, and you either learn it or drown. You can feel the force of each rise in your knees, your spine, the back of your skull. The body becomes an echo chamber for motion. You look at the man beside you. His hood is crusted with ice, his eyes half closed, his lips moving silently. He could be praying, or cursing, or counting waves. Everyone develops small rituals to cope with the noise. One man taps his fingers on his shield in patterns that never repeat. Another hums through his teeth, just loud enough to feel the vibration. You chew on a piece of dried leather until your jaw aches. It's not about distraction, it's about control. You can't stop the sea, but you can give yourself something to command, even if it's small. The sound of the waves changes when they hit differently. You know the difference between a broad slap of water on the hull and the sharper crack of spray hitting the shields. You can tell when a big one is coming by the pores before it lands. That single heartbeat of silence when the world seems to hold its breath. Then the impact comes, loud, heavy, a sound that rattles teeth. The ship lurches, men curse, and cold water splashes over your legs. It happens so often that you barely react anymore. The cold bites, but it's predictable. Predictable is safety. At night, the roar gets worse, and the darkness swallows distance, so the sound feels closer, like the sea has crept onto the deck beside you. You can't see the waves coming. You only feel the heave, hear the crash, and wait for the next. The wind turns your hood into a drum, slapping against your ears until the noise feels personal. You press your hands to the sides of your head, but it doesn't help. The sea finds every gap. The helmsman stands like a statue at the stern, one hand on the tiller, the other gripping a rope for balance. His cloak whips around him, frozen in creases. You can barely see his face under the hood, but you know he's awake because he's always awake. The roar is his company. The rest of you try to ignore it. He listens. You envy him for that strange kind of patience. Sometimes the noise plays tricks. You hear voices in it, a shout, a laugh, your own name whispered from somewhere in the dark. You turn, but there's no one there, only water and wind. The brain gets strange when it's tired and deafened by sound that never ends. You start imagining things. You think you hear the crackle of fire or the murmur of conversation, familiar noises from home, but they fade as soon as you notice them. What's real is the sea, always the sea. Everything else is memory fighting extinction. You begin to understand why the sagas talk about the ocean as a god. It isn't a metaphor. You can feel its moods, its power, its indifference. You realise that it doesn't hate you, because hatred would require noticing you. It doesn't even know you're here. The roar isn't anger, it's nature, pure and absolute. It's the sound of existence, continuing whether or not you survive to hear it tomorrow. You try to sleep, curling under your cloak, pressing your forehead against the rough wood. The roar fills your dreams. It becomes your heartbeat, your breath, your thoughts. You dream of drowning, but not violently. You dream of sinking quietly into that sound, like falling asleep inside a thunderstorm. You wake unsure of whether you ever slept at all. When the weather worsens, the sea adds new instruments to its orchestra. The ropes groan, the oars slam in their locks, the shields clatter. The mast moans as it leans into the wind, the sound rising and falling like an animal in pain. The men shout orders, their voices snatched away before they reach anyone. The noise becomes total. You can't even hear yourself think. You stop trying. The only thing left to do is hold on and match your breathing to the rhythm of the ship. Hours pass that way. You don't count them. Counting is useless here. Time belongs to the noise now. You live between crashes, between breaths, between moments of balance. The roar becomes the measure of life. When it's loud, you're still part of the world. When it stops, it means something worse. So you listen, you endure, you let it consume you because resistance only makes you smaller. Then sometimes, without warning, the sea calms. The wind drops, the waves flatten. The roar fades to a whisper. The silence is worse. It's too empty. Too clean. Your ears ring with ghosts of sound. Phantom crashes that never come. You look around, waiting for the next blow, but it doesn't arrive. The men glance at each other uneasy. The sea feels wrong when it's quiet. It's like standing in a room with someone who's stopped breathing. The calm never lasts long. It's just the sea catching its breath before the next assault. You can feel it building. The subtle pressure in the air. The low rumble beneath the hull. The tension in the ropes. You brace before you even know why. Then the wind returns, so harder than before, and the longship pitches violently. The roar comes back with a vengeance, louder, deeper, alive. The men curse and laugh at the same time. You find yourself grinning through chattering teeth, because the noise means motion, and motion means life. You wipe the salt from your eyes, spit the brine from your mouth, and keep your grip on the edge of the bench. The water slams into the side again, spraying you with cold so sharp it feels electric. The roar drowns everything else. It eats your thoughts, your fatigue, your fear. You stop being a man on a ship. You become part of the sound. By the time the horizon starts to pale, your ears are buzzing. You can't tell if the sea has quieted, or if you've gone deaf to its anger. The men move sluggishly, eyes half shut, motion slow but practiced. No one speaks. They don't need to. The roar is still there, steady, endless, eternal. The North Atlantic sings its one song, and you listen because you have no choice. The longship moves through the grey like a scar across the water. You pull your cloak tighter, blink the salt from your lashes, and let the sound carry you forward into whatever waits beyond the next wave. You stop noticing the smell until the wind changes. Then it hits you again, thick, sour, and alive. The air on the longship has weight. It's heavy with sweat, fish oil, salt, smoke, and the kind of damp that never dries. The scent clings to everything. Your cloak, your beard, your gloves, even the inside of your mouth. There's no escaping it, because there's no clean thing left. Everything that touches the sea becomes the sea. You've stopped trying to separate yourself from it. The wool you wear has been soaked and dried so many times that it no longer remembers its original texture. It's half cloth, half crust. You peel it off in patches when you can, but it sticks to your skin like another layer of flesh. It holds the memory of every wave that's ever hit you. Every moment you thought you might freeze, and didn't. The smell of it is a reminder of survival, rank but honest. When you pull the cloak over your shoulders again, the heat inside smells faintly of wet animal and smoke. You breathe through it anyway. It's better than the cold. Your tunic scratches against your ribs. The wool is rough, made from whatever could be spun and traded cheaply back home. There are stains on it you don't recognise anymore. Salt, sweat, maybe blood, maybe something worse. When it's wet, it weighs twice what it should, dragging at your shoulders until your back feels bent. When it's dry, which is almost never, it turns stiff, a shell more than a garment. You think sometimes about throwing it overboard and starting fresh, but what would you wear then? The air? The sea would take your skin next. Your boots are worse. Leather shrinks when it's wet and stretches when it's warm. and you never get either condition for long. They're cracked, stiff around the ankles, soft near the toes where the salt water has eaten away the seams. The laces are rawhide strips you've replaced 3 times already. They harden overnight, freezing into shapes that no longer fit your feet. In the morning, you kick the boots against the bench to break them loose, then shove your feet in before the leather decides to turn back into wood. You can hear it creak when you walk. Every step is an argument between the shoe and your flesh. Your gloves are gone. You cut the fingers off them 2 days ago to use as patches for something else. Now your hands are wrapped in rags, damp and stiff, stained black with tar from the ropes. You can't remember what your skin smelled like before tar. Maybe smoke, maybe soil. You rub your fingers together, and they squeak faintly from the salt. It's not pain you feel anymore, just dull pressure where the cold sits like a parasite. You flex them out of habit, not belief. When men move on the deck, the smell changes again. A gust brings a mixture of wet wool, stale ale, and bodies that have worked too long without washing. You can tell who's closest by the kind of stench they carry. The younger ones smell of fear and nerves, sharp and sour. The older ones smell like the ship itself. Wood, salt, smoke, and endurance. You've joined their ranks without realizing it. The wind that once gagged you now just reminds you that you're alive. The longship is small enough that you can smell every man on it. When the wind blows from the stern, it carries the scent of sweat from the rowers forward, where it mingles with the pitch of the hull, and the wet iron of weapons. The smell gets trapped under the low sail, swirling until it becomes its own weather. When rain falls, it cleans nothing. It just rearranges the stink, pushes it lower, softens it for an hour, then leaves it stronger than before. You think sometimes about how you must smell to anyone who isn't here. A Viking on a ship doesn't smell like a warrior or a legend. He smells like mould and salt and oil, like a fire that went out days ago but still smokes. You laugh to yourself, imagining the poets describing this part, how the great seafarers of the north carried the perfume of rotting fish and soaked wool wherever they went. It's not the kind of story people sing about. You can't blame them. Every few days, when the weather allows, someone will suggest airing out the furs. It's more of a ritual than a real solution. You hang the blankets over the side in the thin sunlight, and the sea breeze pretends to help. The smell of brine just replaces the smell of sweat. You fold them back up, slightly drier but just as offensive. When the next wave hits, they're wet again, and the ritual resets. You run your fingers through your beard, trying to break the ice that's formed there. The frost melts just enough to drip onto your chest. It smells faintly of salt and leather. Everything does. You rub at the spot, spreading the damp around rather than drying it. The action is pointless but comforting. Doing anything is better than sitting still and noticing how bad the world smells. Some of the men have taken to chewing herbs to fight the taste of rot. Dried mint, maybe, or seaweed. It doesn't help much. The smell comes from inside now. The air you breathe is made of salt and decay. It lives in your lungs, seeps through your pores. You could scrub yourself raw, and it would still be there. You wonder if the smell will ever leave you when you reach land, or if it's permanent, a tattoo made of air. A man near the bow burps loudly, the sound carrying above the waves. It smells like ale, fish, and something that shouldn't have been eaten. No one reacts. Everyone's used to it. The body is just another thing that rots slower than the sea wants it to. Someone else spits over the side, the dark blob vanishing into the grey water without a splash. You follow it with your eyes until you can't. The sea looks clean, but it isn't. You've dumped worse into it. Everyone has. There's a point where the air feels thick enough to chew. You wake in the middle of the night and find the smell sitting above you like fog. You can taste it when you open your mouth. You pull your cloak over your face, but it traps the same stink inside. The wool smells of sweat and animal fat, the fur of old rain and oil. You bury your face in it anyway, because at least it's yours. The ship reeks like 1,000 strangers, sirs, but your own filth feels familiar. You learn to prefer the scent of your cloak to the scent of the sea. Leather straps hang from everywhere, on shields, weapons, water skins. They creak when they move, stretching and shrinking with each wave. When you touch them, they're slick and cold. The salt has turned them white in places. You rub one between your fingers and feel the stiff grain, wondering how long before it cracks completely. The smell of it lingers on your hand, a mixture of animal and earth. It should be comforting. It isn't. You glance toward the stern, where the steering oar is lashed. The handle is wrapped in leather that's darkened with sweat and spray. The helmsman grips it constantly, his hand leaving the same print again and again until it's part of the surface. The smell there is strongest, a mixture of salt, iron, and human endurance. You can smell it even from where you sit. It smells like work, like staying alive 1 hour longer than the weather says you should. When the wind blows from the south, you catch something new. The faint rot of the cargo hold, where barrels of fish oil and dried meat are stored. The oil has leaked, mixing with seawater into a foul soup that sloshes with the motion of the ship. You don't look at it anymore, and the smell is bad enough. It rises through the cracks and settles around you like invisible smoke. It sticks to your hair, your eyebrows, your tongue. You can't wash it away. You just breathe through it until your senses give up. Every time you move, the smell shifts. When you lift your arm, a wave of damp wool hits you. When you turn your head, you catch a new note of salt or rot. It's like the ship is exhaling around you, releasing the day's collection of odours into the night air. The only thing worse than the smell is the thought of losing it. If the air ever smelled clean again, it would mean you'd left this place, and you're not sure you're ready for that yet. The cold makes everything sharper. When you inhale, the air burns, and the smell cuts deeper. You think about the word fresh, how it used to mean pleasant. Out here, fresh is cruel. Fresh air means wind, and wind means more cold. You start to prefer the thick, stale air trapped under your cloak. It might stink, but it's warm. You breathe shallowly, hoarding what little heat your body gives off. Someone starts a low argument near the mast. Voice is muffled, but tense. You can smell their breath from where you sit. Ale, onion, and the faint sweetness of rot. The fight dies quickly. Words waste air, and air carries smell. When the silence returns, the stink of humanity feels heavier than before. You close your eyes and try to remember what clean snow smells like. You can't. You've forgotten. You shift your weight, pulling your damp cloak tighter, and listen to the sea. The smell doesn't go away, but the rhythm of the waves drowns it out in your mind. You start to think maybe the sea's noise is a mercy. It covers the sounds of men, and maybe their smell too. The ship creaks, the leather squeaks, the wool sighs against the wood. Everything is alive in its own sour way. When dawn comes, the air doesn't improve. The sun only makes the stink more visible, the frost on the wall glinting like jewels on filth. You stand, stretch your stiff legs, and look around at the men beside you. They look as bad as you smell, which is to say, terrible but functioning. You smile faintly at the absurdity of it. 30 unwashed bodies crossing the ocean like it's normal. You spit into the wind, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, and breathe in the same foul air you've been breathing for weeks. It smells like the sea, like effort, like life that refuses to quit. You take another breath and start working. Because out here, you either get used to the stink or become part of it. Nights on the North Atlantic aren't dark, they're heavy. They press down like a lid, trapping every breath, every whisper, every ounce of warmth left in your body and wringing it out into the air. The longship becomes a refrigerator carved out of wind and water, and you live inside it. There's no fire to fight back with, no flicker of orange to remind you what warmth used to look like. Just men, wood, and the cold, all sharing the same slow battle against something you can't touch and can't escape. Fire is the one thing the longship can't have. You can bring iron and blood, rage and song, but not flame. One spark, and the sea wins instantly. The wood, soaked through but still flammable, would turn to smoke faster than you could say a prayer. Everyone knows it, so you settle for small cheats. A handful of coals hidden in a clay pot. A little iron stove sometimes, if someone thought to bring one. A twist of smouldering moss tucked under a shield, just enough to keep a knife handle from icing over. The light from those things barely touches the darkness. You can see faces only as ghostly outlines. You hear breathing, creaking, shifting, but you don't see eyes anymore. Just the dull reflection of frost where a man's beard used to move. You lie down with your cloak wrapped tight and your knees pulled to your chest. The fur has stiffened into a shell that crackles when you move. Beneath it, your wool tunic feels like damp sandpaper. The boards under you are colder than metal. You can feel the temperature bleeding through them, up into your bones. It doesn't matter how many layers you wear. The sea always wins in the end. You curl tighter, trying to make yourself small enough that your own heat can find you again. Hypothermia doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks. First you shiver, not badly, just enough to remind you that your muscles still care. Then the shivering gets worse, harder, uncontrollable. Your teeth knock together until your jaw aches. Your hands shake even when you're not doing anything. Then if you're unlucky, or lucky depending on how you see it, the shivering stops. That's when you should worry. That's when your body starts surrendering. You've seen it happen. A man goes quiet, his eyes go strange, his face relaxes like he's falling asleep. You shout at him, shake him, slap him if you have to. You make him move. Movement is life. Stillness is permission. You can't feel your fingers anymore. You tell them to move, and they do, but only because you've been training them to obey out of habit. You rub them together under the blanket, each frictionless motion a small prayer. You blow into your palms, but your breath turns to fog before it even reaches your skin. The cold eats every bit of warmth the second it's born. You remember to feel the fire once, how it stung before it soothed. Now even a memory hurts. The sea looks different at night when it's this cold. It shines in the moonlight, not blue or grey, but white, like beaten steel. Frost forms on the edges of the ship, on the ropes, on the oars. The frost grows while you watch. crawling upward like it's alive. The sound changes too. The usual slap of water turns brittle, sharper. Even the waves freeze in motion for a heartbeat before breaking. The spray that hits your face feels like needles. You turn away, burying yourself deeper under your cloak. It doesn't help much, but it makes the act of suffering smaller, contained. The men don't talk on nights like this. Talking wastes heat. Breath is precious. When someone does speak, the words come out slow and hoarse, and the steam from his mouth hangs in the air like a ghost. You listen more than you join in. The sentences are short. Colder than last night. Keep moving. Still breathing. That's the vocabulary of survival. No one mentions comfort. That word died the first week. Some men sing quietly to themselves, not for morale, but for rhythm. The tune is always the same, monotone, low, repetitive. It fills the space between the waves, gives the mind something to hold on to. Others rock slightly back and forth, the same motion they used when rowing. It's a strange kind of prayer, muscle memory pretending to be hope. You do it too after a while. The body doesn't like being still. Stillness invites the cold in. Your feet are the worst part. The wet boots press against your skin like ice moulds. You try to wiggle your toes, but the motion barely registers. You imagine the colour they must be. Purple maybe, or white. You don't want to check. You tuck your legs under yourself, hoping the position will trap what little heat remains. You remember being told once that the Vikings were built for this, that their blood ran thick with endurance. You're not so sure that's true. You suspect they were just better at pretending it didn't hurt. The smell of frost is something only people who've lived through it understand. It's clean and cruel at the same time, like metal left too long in the snow. You can smell it now, sharp enough to make your nose sting. It mixes with the familiar stink of wool, tar, and men. You can tell how cold the night is by how much of that other smell the frost covers. The colder it gets, the more the air smells clean. That's the irony of it. The closer you are to freezing, the purer the air becomes. Someone near you starts to shake uncontrollably. You hear the rattle of his teeth before you see him. You reach out, grab his arm, and shake him hard. His skin feels like stone through the layers. He doesn't fight you. He just blinks, slow and dazed. You slap him once, not out of anger but necessity. He grunts, then starts moving. Arms first, then legs. You nod. That's enough. Movement means another hour alive. You go back to your own battle, your own slow war against the cold. The stars look close enough to touch, cruelly bright against the black sky. You'd think that would bring some comfort, but it doesn't. They only remind you how far you are from warmth. You stare at them anyway because looking at something that isn't water feels like freedom, even if it's just for a few seconds. The constellations don't move fast enough. The sky is a frozen dome, and you're trapped under it. When the ship tilts, the cold water that's pooled on the deck shifts too, running in thin streams between the boards. You can hear it moving, whispering across the woods. If you're unlucky, it finds its way under your cloak. The shock steals your breath every time. You hiss between your teeth and try to roll away, but there's nowhere to go. Everyone's packed tight. You feel the cold spreading slowly from your side to your back, a creeping numbness that feels too much like surrender. The night stretches on, time dripping like cold tar. You stop checking the stars. Stop thinking about dawn. You live in moments now. Each breath, each heartbeat, each time you manage to move your fingers. The cold wants to take those small things from you. You refuse, But it's not defiance anymore. It's reflex. Sometimes, in the worst hours before morning, you think you feel warmth. It's never real. It's the body's last trick, the lie it tells before shutting down. You've seen men smile right before they froze, whisper that it's finally not so bad. You know better. When you feel the illusion creeping in, you move faster. You force yourself to sit up, to flex your hands, to curse out loud. Cursing helps. It fills the air with sound, and sound is proof that you're still here. If you're lucky, the wind shifts just enough to bring a hint of warmer air from the south. It's not much, barely a degree, but you feel it immediately. The men breathe a little easier. The shivering slows. You risk pulling your hood back for a moment, letting the air hit your face. It feels almost pleasant compared to the hours before. You know it won't last, but you take it anyway. Every tiny mercy counts. You drift somewhere between sleep and survival, your body conserving what it can. You dream of fire, but not like you used to. Not the crackle or the warmth. You dream of its colour. Orange, red, gold. You wake up with those colours still glowing behind your eyes, and the world still grey. You exhale, the breath turning to mist, and feel the ache in your chest where the dream used to be. The sky begins to lighten, faint and colourless. Dawn is just another version of the night. Less dark, no warmer. The men move slowly like ghosts, dragging their own bodies. You do the same. The cold has won small victories everywhere. Fingers stiff, faces cracked, eyes swollen from the sting of wind. But you're still here. You're always still here. The coals in the iron pot are dead, just dull ash now. Someone stirs them anyway. Out of habit, maybe hope. Nothing glows. You all watch for a moment, then look away. The ship groans. The wind shifts again. The day begins without ceremony. The cold doesn't leave. It just changes shape. You stand, pull your cloak tighter, and grab your oar. Your breath fogs in the air, rising briefly before disappearing. You row, not to stay warm, but because it's the only thing that keeps you from freezing where you sit. There's no glory in it, no legend. Just men, frost and motion. Fireless nights that never end, and the quiet, stubborn heartbeat of life refusing to stop. And as the ship moves forward, cutting through the steel-grey sea, you know the battle isn't over. It just waits for the next night to begin again. You learn fast that surviving the Northern Sea isn't about bravery or strength. It's about layers. Every Viking who ever crossed these waters knew that warmth was an illusion made out of wool, leather, and stubbornness. You can't fight the cold directly. It always wins. You can only slow it down, trick it, by a few more hours of comfort before it remembers where you are. The way you dress becomes the way you live. It's not vanity, it's strategy. You start with linen. The first layer against your skin, rough spun and never quite dry. It's supposed to wick the sweat away, but it mostly just collects it. A damp reminder of effort. You wear it anyway, because it's better than having nothing between your skin and the wool. The shirt smells like salt and work. The cuffs are frayed, the seams stiff with grime. You've worn it long enough that it feels more like a second skin than clothing, and you'd rather keep it that way than risk the shock of fresh cloth against raw flesh. Over that comes wool, thick, coarse and scratchy, the kind that bites at first before softening with heat. The Vikings knew wool was magic long before anyone called it that. Even soaked through, it holds warmth. It doesn't mind getting wet, it just adjusts. You pull the tunic down over your hips, the weight of it settling like armour. The sleeves are heavy, the weave tight enough to fight the wind, but loose enough to let you move. You feel the pull in your shoulders where the fabric clings. Every man on the ship wears some version of it, dyed if he's lucky, patched if he's not. You can tell a man's fortune by how many layers he can afford. Then the trousers. Thick wool again, tucked into boots or bound at the ankle with strips of leather. The material never fits quite right. It's always too stiff or too loose, and the damp air turns it into something that moulds to your shape, whether you like it or not. You wrap woolen leg bindings around the lower half, crisscrossing from ankle to knee. They keep the fabric from riding up, but more than that, they trap air, hold heat. Every inch matters. You've seen what happens to bearskin out here. The cold doesn't nibble, it devours. Your boots are leather, lined with whatever fur you could find. Sometimes seal, sometimes sheep, sometimes something else entirely. The fur is matted now, dark with moisture, and it smells like salt and age. You pack straw inside them when you can. Fresh straw means a good night's rest, or as good as you'll get. It soaks up the damp and gives you another layer between your flesh and the frost creeping through the boards. You shake it out in the morning, replace it when possible, and pray the supply lasts until land. The belt comes next, wide and heavy, cut from cowhide that's been rubbed with fat until it shines. It's not just for holding weapons. It cinches the heat close to your core, keeps the layers from shifting when the ship rolls. You tighten it until it almost hurts, then let it out a notch to breathe. The buckle is cold metal, biting against your fingers. You touch it often, not for comfort, but for reassurance that it's still there. The belt feels like the last human thing left in a world that's all water and wood. Over everything goes the cloak. Wool again, thick and coarse, fastened with a brooch or just tied at the neck. Some men have furs sewn onto theirs, fox, bear, wolf if they're lucky, dog if they're not. The fur isn't luxury, it's survival. It catches snow before it melts, traps the thin heat your body gives off, and keeps the wind from cutting straight through. You wear it day and night. It smells of smoke and salt, of fires that burned long before this voyage. When you pull it around you, it feels like memory. Heavy, imperfect, necessary. If you're clever, you keep your head covered too. A wool cap, maybe, or a hood that drapes down your neck. The Vikings knew that heat leaves from the top first. You can feel it when you forget. That sudden bite of air on your scalp that makes your eyes water. The hood darkens your world, cuts the wind's teeth, turns the endless grey into something smaller, more survivable. You tuck your beard inside it to stop the frost from binding the hairs together. You've seen men tear their own skin trying to break the ice loose from their faces. You've learned not to make that mistake. The gloves are the weakest link. You wrap rags around your hands, or old strips of wool if you have them. Leather would work better, but the sea ruins leather faster than it ruins men. You pull the rags tight, knot them, and blow into your fists. It's not warmth exactly, but it's motion, and motion is close enough. You've seen older warriors pull their sleeves down over their knuckles instead, their fingers bare and red, gripping oars with skin that's gone hard as bark. They say they don't feel the cold anymore. You know they're lying. Everyone feels it. They've just made peace with it. Layering becomes a ritual. Every morning you check each piece, the seams, the knots, the folds. Every night you shake the ice off and hang the cloak if you can. There's pride in doing it right, in outlasting the weather through sheer preparation. You start to understand that clothing isn't just protection, it's the line between living and being lost. The sea takes the careless first. You make sure you're not one of them. Endurance is the last layer, the one you can't see but feel in every breath. You endure by ignoring what you can't change. The smell, the damp, the cold that crawls up your spine at night. You tell yourself it's not that bad, even when it is. You count movements instead of minutes, chores instead of hours. You bail water. You mend a rope. You scrape ice from the planks with your knife. Every task is another way to keep from thinking about how much colder it will be tomorrow. When the wind shifts, you huddle with the others. Layer meets layer, cloak meets cloak. Bodies pressing together in silence. It's not camaraderie, it's efficiency. The warmth spreads slowly, shared through damp wool and stiff fur. You can feel the heartbeat of the man beside you through 3 layers of clothing. It's slow, steady, familiar. You start breathing in time with him, sinking like oars in rhythm. It's strange how human warmth feels more like strategy than affection out here. You don't need friendship to share heat. You just need bodies. You've stopped wondering how long you can keep it up. The body adapts to everything eventually. The first few days, the cold felt unbearable. Now it's just background noise. Your skin burns less, your fingers tremble less, your breath comes in shallow, controlled bursts. You move slower, but more deliberately. You've learned to waste nothing. Not heat, not motion, not energy. The layers aren't just on your body anymore. They're in your mind. Thick layers of habit and denial, stacked carefully to keep despair from getting in. When dawn comes, the light doesn't bring warmth. It just gives shape to the suffering you already know by touch. You pull your hood tighter, shake the frost from your beard, and flex your fingers. You can feel the stiffness in every joint, the weight of every layer clinging to your body like armour made of fatigue. You check the knots on your cloak, the ties on your boots, the bindings on your legs. Everything's where it should be. That's the only victory you can ask for. The men start moving, one by one, groaning as they stand. You can hear the sound of frozen wool creaking as they stretch. A few curse quietly, their breath clouding the air. You smile a little. It's a good sign. Complaining means they're still alive enough to care. You reach for your oar, the wood slick with frost. And the day begins again. Layers against wind, cloth against water, man against everything else. The sea doesn't notice the difference between naked and clothed. It doesn't care about your wool, or your leather, or your plans. But you care. You wrap yourself again, one fold at a time. Not because you think you'll beat it, but because it's what you do. The cold comes, the layers hold, the body endures. That's the way of it. There's no glory in staying warm. There's only survival. And that, out here, is enough. You stop thinking of time the way you used to. There's no sunrise that feels like morning. No sunset that feels like night. Just the cycle of work and exhaustion, rowing and waiting. The slow exchange between storms and the brief, deceptive peace that follows them. On a Viking longship, there are no clocks, only shifts, watches, the rhythm of men moving, sleeping, waking, rowing, all dictated by the wind, the sea, and how much strength is left in their arms. You learn to live in pieces, one stretch of duty at a time. The helmsman decides the shifts. His voice doesn't rise above the wind, it cuts through it. One call and men move like a machine. Half the crew rows while the other half rests, if rest is what you can call it. It's more like collapsing with purpose. You don't lie down because you're comfortable. You lie down because your body won't hold you upright any longer. Your muscles stop listening after hours of pulling against the sea. The only thing that keeps them going is habit. You know when it's your turn before anyone says it? The pattern is carved into your bones. You can feel it in your arms, in your shoulders. The ache has its own rhythm. When the order comes, you move without thinking. You take your place, your hands wrapping around the oar that's as cold as iron. The wood is slick, worn smooth by too many grips. You settle into the motion, pull, breathe, shift, pull again. The oar dips, the ship lurches, the sound of water striking wood fills the air. The men move together like one thing. The rhythm is harsh, but it's the only comfort you get. Between watches, you try to rest. That's what they call it, rest. What it really means is lying still long enough for your heartbeat to slow and your arms to stop shaking. The deck is hard, the board's slick with salt, but you stop noticing. You find a corner near the middle of the ship where the rocking is smaller and curl up in your cloak. Your whole world shrinks to the space under that wool. The smell is bad, the air thick, but it's yours. You breathe it in like safety. The sound of rowing never stops. Even when you're off duty, it's there. The steady slap of oars against the water, the low grunt of effort from the men still working. It becomes a lullaby in reverse. Instead of soothing you, it reminds you that your turn is coming. You count the strokes in your head without meaning to, matching your breath to the rhythm until your body forgets it's supposed to rest. Sleep is shallow when it comes. You drift in and out, half conscious, your dreams blending with the sound of the sea. Sometimes you wake up mid-dream, convinced you're still rowing. Your hands twitch, your shoulders jerk. You open your eyes, see the dark curve of the sail above, and remember where you are. Storms don't care about shifts. They decide their own schedules. When the wind starts howling, there's no rest, no rhythm, no system left. Every man becomes part of the same fight. You bail water, tighten ropes, brace the sail. Sleep disappears completely, replaced by motion and fear. You move because stopping would mean freezing, drowning, or both. You don't even look at the others anymore. You just act. You feel the ship rising under you, dropping, shuddering. The noise is everywhere. Wind, water, men shouting to no one. When the storm finally passes, it leaves everything soaked, bruised, and strangely quiet. The silence feels wrong at first. You've gotten used to the roar. Now there's only the creak of wet wood and the sound of men breathing too loudly. The shift schedule starts again, but slower. Everyone moves like old men. The helmsman doesn't need to shout anymore. His voice is enough. Half the men row. The others collapse where they can. You're in the second group this time. You lie down again, your back against a shield, your knees drawn up. You feel every heartbeat in your neck. Your hands shake without permission. You try to stretch, but your muscles seize. You close your eyes and wait for the tremors to pass. You tell yourself you'll sleep. You never quite do. You hover in that grey space between waking and oblivion. You feel the cold leaking in again, slow and methodical. You shift your position, tuck the cloak tighter, press your face into the fur. It smells like salt and breath, and the faint sweetness of decay. You breathe it anyway. The men around you whisper sometimes, their voices soft like they're afraid to wake the sea. They talk about home, mostly. About roofs that don't move, and food that doesn't come out of a barrel. No one laughs, but no one mocks them either. You listen without joining in. You stopped talking about home days ago. The memories hurt more than the cold. You've learned that the only way to rest is to think about nothing. The mind needs stillness as much as the body. You chase it the same way you chase warmth, desperately, knowing you'll lose it again soon. You don't use a blanket anymore. You wear your exhaustion instead. It's heavier, warmer in its own way. Your body runs on habit now. Even in rest, your arms twitch with phantom strokes. Your hands curl around invisible oars. You've become part of the rhythm. Even when you're still, the ship rocks, your breath matches it, and for a while, that's enough. When the call comes to switch again, you rise without complaint. You pull yourself up slowly, feeling the cold pull at your joints. You shake your cloak free of frost and step over sleeping bodies. No one looks up. They'll take your place soon enough. You move to your bench, slide the oar into the water, and start again. The first pull hurts the most. It always does. The second hurts less. By the third, you're part of the motion again. Sometimes, when the sea is calm and the wind mild, the shifts stretch longer. The rowing slows, the pace softens, and the sound of water becomes almost gentle. You find yourself nodding off even as you work, your mind slipping away for a heartbeat at a time. You see flashes of things, faces, firelight, fields. You blink and they vanish. You keep rowing. The watches at night are worse. The dark is absolute, the stars hidden behind clouds. The helmsman stands alone, a shadow barely visible in the gloom. You watch him from your bench, wondering if he ever sleeps. The man's body looks carved from frost, his breath a steady mist. You envy him in a strange way. At least he has a task that doesn't end. The rest of you trade exhaustion like coin. One man sleeps, another rows, another bails, another stares blankly into the fog, his mind gone somewhere warmer. No one counts the hours anymore. You just wait for the next command. The word day loses its meaning. The world is grey whether the sun is up or not. You start to understand that sleep isn't something you get here. It's something you steal. A few minutes, maybe half an hour if you're lucky. You learn to drop into it instantly, the way a knife drops into water. No dreams, no transition, just gone. The moment you stop moving, your body shuts off. When it wakes, you're not rested, just reactivated. That's enough. You tell yourself it's enough. The men who can't do it don't last long. You've seen them stumble, their eyes unfocused, hands shaking, breath coming too fast. They miss a stroke, slip on the deck, fall asleep sitting up. Someone always catches them, shakes them awake, curses them back into motion. You don't get to rest if you can't wake fast. The sea doesn't allow it. When the weather softens and the horizon clears, you almost forget what you've been through. The shift feels lighter, the oar easier. The men talk more. Someone hums. The sound carries across the deck, low and rough, and you join in without realising. The song doesn't mean anything. It's just noise, a reminder that you're still human. You let the rhythm take over again. Pull, breathe, and you stop thinking about storms and watches. The sea, for once, feels almost kind. That illusion never lasts. You know that. Another wind will come. Another storm. Another long night where you'll lie under your cloak, pretending not to shake. But that's later. Right now, the rhythm holds. The ship moves steady. You catch a moment of something that almost feels like peace. You know better than to name it. Out here, naming good things makes them vanish. So you just row. You row, you breathe, you endure. The watch will end soon, and then it will be your turn to rest again. Not for long, but long enough to start over. You start to notice, after the first week, that even in a place as miserable as a Viking longship in the North Atlantic, hierarchy still finds a way to exist. There's no crown, no throne, no marble hall. Just a long, narrow strip of wood filled with cold, wet men who row, eat, sleep, and curse in unison. But order doesn't need luxury to survive. It just needs habit. And habit runs deep. Every man knows his place, even here, where the world has shrunk to a single, creaking vessel caught between sky and sea. The hierarchy begins with the helmsman. He stands at the stern, wrapped in layers thicker than anyone else's, his hand gripping the tiller like it's part of him. He doesn't talk much, doesn't need to. His authority isn't in words, it's in the way the ship obeys him. The men might grumble about him under their breath, but they still move when he gestures. He knows the sea's moods better than anyone, and that kind of knowledge earns quiet respect. When it comes time to sleep, he gets the driest place, a patch near the stern where the deck is slightly raised and the spray doesn't hit as hard. He doesn't sleep often, but when he does, no one bothers him. You wouldn't dare. Below him are the steersman's assistants, the navigators, the older men who can read the stars, the ones who remember the feel of the wind without needing to check the sail. They don't row as much. Their strength lies in direction, not endurance. They get the next best spots, close to the stern as well, where the pitch of the ship is gentler and the boards are less slick. It's warmer there too, protected by the curve of the hull. The air smells faintly less of fish and more of tar and leather. It's still miserable, but in relative terms, it's paradise. The warriors come next, the fighters who carry heavier weapons, who have proven themselves in raids or battles. On land, they'd be the first to charge into a fight. On the ship, they're the first to claim a good place to lie down. They tend to stick close to each other, sleeping near the centre of the vessel, where the motion is steadier and the cold doesn't bite as hard. Their shields line the sides like walls, creating a little protection from the wind. They sleep with one arm over their weapons, ready to wake swinging if startled. No one tries to take their spots. Even half asleep, a warrior's instincts are faster than a thief's courage. Then there are the rowers, the muscle of the ship. Most of them are younger men, farmers or fishermen back home, built more for endurance than glory. Their places are the benches themselves. They sit on them by day and sleep beneath them by night. It's not comfort, it's strategy. The benches offer the smallest bit of shelter from the wind, and the curve of the hull keeps off some of the spray. You lie down with your cloak over you, your legs curled under the oarlocks, your face pressed against wood that smells of sweat and salt. You can feel the heartbeat of the ship there, the vibrations of every stroke, every wave, every command shouted down the line. The new men, the lowest of all, sleep where they can, usually near the bow. That's the worst place on the longship. Every wave breaks there first, slamming against the prow and spraying anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. The planks are constantly wet, the sound of water hammering against the hull deafening. The cold hits hardest there too, carried by the wind that comes slicing straight off the ocean. It's the spot everyone remembers from their first voyage, the spot everyone works to leave behind. The bow isn't just a location, it's a lesson. You survive it, and the rest of the ship starts to feel almost bearable. The hierarchy isn't enforced with threats or punishments. It's understood. The older men earn their places by surviving voyages the younger ones haven't yet imagined. You might envy them their drier spots, their slightly warmer cloaks, but you know they'll give them up one day, when the next generation comes along to freeze in their stead. The sea teaches humility that way. Every man here has been the one at the bow once. Every man has clawed his way toward the middle. Sleeping arrangements follow this invisible order. The best spots, the ones under the curved edges of the hull, away from the spray, near the ship's centre of balance, belong to the veterans. They find the small hollows where the boards dip just enough to cradle a body. They stuff rope under their heads to lift them from the wet. They know which seams leak and which ones don't. You can tell who's done this before by the way they settle down. One quick motion, cloak over shoulder, fur pulled tight, asleep within minutes. The rest of you experiment, fail, adjust. You lie down too close to the mast and wake with your cloak soaked through. You try the bow and learn to sleep in time with the impact of waves. You curl up beside a barrel that leaks, beside a man who snores, beside the pile of ropes that seems soft until it isn't. You learn that the ship gives nothing freely. Every comfortable spot has a cost. Noise, damp, or proximity to someone who dreams violently. The men near the stern sometimes share their warmth, but only if there's room. The cold makes generosity rare. If you find a dry patch near them, you guard it like treasure. Even in sleep, you angle your body to hold it. The boards are cold, but they're consistent, and consistency becomes a kind of comfort. You start to recognize the sound of your sleeping neighbors by breath alone. The deep, slow inhale of the man to your left, the raspy whistle of the one to your right. You listen for changes. A sudden silence can mean someone slipped too far into the cold's grip. When that happens, you nudge them, curse at them, shake them awake. It's not kindness, it's routine. Everyone returns the favour eventually. You can always tell when someone's new by how they treat their cloak. The rookies fold it, roll it, tuck it carefully. The veterans just drop it, lie on it, and pull what's left over themselves. The rookies sleep like men afraid to move. The veterans sleep like they've made peace with discomfort. You watch and copy them, adjusting how you lie until you no longer fight the motion of the ship. When you finally get it right, you feel something close to stillness, even while the sea rocks you. You never really sleep through the night. The cold wakes you. The creak of the hull wakes you. The change in the rhythm of the oars wakes you. You get used to it. You learn to open your eyes without panic, to check the sky, to listen for voices before deciding if it's time to move. You stop dreaming about beds and blankets. You start dreaming about silence instead. When the weather turns bad, hierarchy dissolves for a while. Everyone sleeps where they can, or not at all. The stern fills up first. Men pack themselves tighter there until there's no space left. The rest huddle near the mast, or between the benches, the ship groaning under their combined weight. You can't tell ranks in those moments. Everyone's just a body trying to keep its heat from escaping. Then, when the storm passes, order quietly reasserts itself. The helmsman returns to his post, the veterans reclaim their spots, and the new men return to the bow. The sea resets everything, but routine rebuilds it again. You realise that the best place to sleep isn't just about position, It's about knowledge. The veterans can find warmth anywhere because they've learned how to make it. They know how to roll the cloak to block wind from the north, how to angle their feet to keep water from pooling, how to use their shield as both bed and wall. They don't wait for comfort, they build it. Watching them is like watching craftsmen shape survival out of nothing. Sometimes, when the sea is merciful and the night still, everyone sleeps at once. No oars move, no voices sound, just the slow rhythm of breath filling the air. You can feel the ship drift, guided by wind and current alone. The sound is soft, almost peaceful, like the ocean itself has decided to rest too. In those moments, hierarchy doesn't matter. No one's above or below anyone else. You're all the same, cold, exhausted, floating between worlds, suspended in a silence that feels earned. But it never lasts. The helmsman stirs, the sail shifts, and someone calls out a direction. The spell breaks. Men groan, pull themselves up, shake the frost from their cloaks. Order returns like breath after a held pause. The sea doesn't allow equality for long. You take your place again, where you belong, where you've earned, and the day begins, as it always does, in motion. Food becomes less about eating and more about survival. You stop thinking in terms of meals and start thinking in terms of rations, bites of salt and fat that keep you from collapsing between shifts. Out here, there's no cooking, no warmth, no smell of smoke to cut through the endless cold. Everything is cold, wet, and tasteless. You eat because your body demands it, not because you want to. The food is stored in barrels and sacks tied down near the centre of the ship, where the rocking is slowest and the water doesn't reach as easily. The barrels are always damp anyway. The salt air creeps into everything. The lids swell and stick, the wood slick with frost. You pry them open with a knife. The metal's so cold it bites your fingers through the cloth. Inside, everything smells the same: brine, old fish, and wood. You learn to breathe through your mouth when you open the barrels. Most days, it's dried fish. Herring or cod, cut thin, salted so hard it feels like chewing rope. You soften it in seawater, which only makes it wet and rubbery instead of dry and sharp. The taste is impossible to describe, because it isn't really a taste anymore. It's just texture and salt. Endless salt. You tear at it with your teeth until your jaw aches. The salt cracks your lips, burns the cuts in your mouth, dries your tongue until you can't swallow. You eat anyway. The salt preserves life, even as it makes it miserable. There's bread too, if you can still call it that. Flat, hard rounds of barley or rye, baked weeks ago and left to dry like stone. You break it on your knee or with a knife, because your hands alone aren't enough. When it gets damp, it turns to glue, sticking to your fingers, your beard, the inside of your throat. You chew it until it softens enough to swallow, washing it down with ale that's half frozen and flat. The bread tastes of smoke and dirt and whatever your mind decides to remember from home. Sometimes, if you close your eyes, you can almost imagine the warmth of a hearth behind it. The illusion lasts for a second before the cold air steals it away. The ale is another story. It's stored in skins, thick leather flasks tied shut with string. In this cold, it freezes solid near the top, turning to slush that you have to squeeze or bite through. The liquid underneath is warmer only because it's hidden. You drink carefully, because too much too fast makes your stomach twist. The ale tastes sour, more vinegar than beer, but you cling to it anyway. It's not about the flavour, It's about the way it burns. The warmth is brief, artificial, but it's something. For a few heartbeats after you swallow, the world feels softer. Some nights, the hunger comes on suddenly. You wake from half sleep with a pit in your stomach so deep it feels like part of you has fallen out. You lie there, trying to ignore it, but it grows until your body demands attention. You roll onto your side, fumble through the dark, and reach for your pack. The leather is stiff, the knots frozen. You work at them with numb fingers until they loosen. Inside, there's the same small hoard you've been guarding. Dried meat, a crust of bread, maybe a handful of nut or seeds if you were lucky when you set out. You take a bite in the dark, the taste dull and familiar. It's not satisfying. It just stops the ache. You've seen men dream about food out here. They wake whispering names of stews, roasts, bread still warm from the oven. They lick their lips, still half asleep, chasing the memory of flavour. The next morning, they eat twice as much as usual, trying to feed the ghost of that dream. Hunger does strange things to the mind. It turns memory into torture. You stop thinking about what you miss, because missing it hurts more than starving. When the weather turns worse, food becomes a chore. You eat standing up, huddled under your cloak, one hand gripping the rope for balance. The ship pitches, the waves crash, and you focus on keeping your food down instead of tasting it. The cold makes every bite slow. Your jaw tightens, your teeth ache from the temperature. The bread freezes at the edges. The fish stiffens again the moment you stop chewing. The ale thickens to slush in the skin, and you squeeze it out like sap from a tree. You don't bother with manners. There's no point. Everyone eats like an animal now. Fast, quiet, with eyes half closed against the cold. When you run low, rationing starts. The helmsman decides how much to cut back. No one argues, not because they agree, but because arguing burns calories you can't afford to lose. You measure food now by survival time. This much bread means 2 more days. This piece of fish means you'll have strength to row until the next calm. You chew slowly, stretching each bite into a moment. Hunger doesn't go away, it just learns to wait. Sometimes, when the wind dies and the sea settles, someone dares to cook. A small fire in an iron bowl, shielded from the wind, a few glowing embers under a pot. It's dangerous and everyone knows it. But the smell of warmth, the faint, greasy smoke of meat fat sizzling in a pan, is enough to make men forget reason for a few minutes. They huddle close, passing around whatever's been heated, sharing bites like communion. The taste is almost nothing, but the heat that comes off the pot feels like a blessing. You can feel it in your face, your chest, your fingers. It reminds you that warmth exists, even if you don't deserve it. You think sometimes about the first feast you'll have when you reach land. You picture roasted meat, ale that's not frozen, bread soft enough to tear. You think about sitting down to eat without the ship's sway under you, without the sound of wind drowning your thoughts. But that dream is dangerous too. You've seen men lose themselves in it, their faces distant as they chew. The sea doesn't like hope. It takes it as a challenge. You try not to think about feasts. You think about the next bite instead. There's one man near the bow who hoards his rations too well. You can smell them when he opens his pack. Something richer than fish, maybe smoked pork or cheese. He eats in the dark, quietly, his back turned. No one calls him out. You just listen to the faint sound of chewing and swallow your own hunger. Everyone knows that if the voyage gets worse, he won't eat alone anymore. Out here, generosity is optional until survival says otherwise. You get used to the taste of salt, the texture of damp bread, the metallic tang of the sea in everything. Your tongue dulls. The act of eating becomes mechanical. You chew, you swallow, you move on. The food is the same every day, but you stop caring. You tell yourself it's fuel, not pleasure. You start believing it. When the hunger wakes you again, sometime past midnight, you reach for your pack before your eyes even open. You chew slowly in the dark, each bite a small victory. The sound of the sea fills the silence, the same endless rhythm. Around you, men shift, groan, dream. The ship creaks. You eat until the ache fades, just enough to sleep again. You fall asleep with food still in your mouth, the taste of salt and leather and survival clinging to your tongue. You begin to understand that fear at sea isn't loud. It doesn't scream or come with drama. It sits quietly, just under your breath, waiting for the sound that confirms it's earned its place. The worst kind of fear isn't the storm, it's what follows it. The calm after. The silence that lets you hear the small sounds. The creak that's just a little too slow. The dull scrape along the hull that means something solid and frozen is moving beneath the surface. The North Atlantic in winter isn't just cold. It's alive with things that shouldn't move, shouldn't float, shouldn't touch the wood that's keeping you from the abyss. You don't always see the ice at first. It finds you before you notice it. The ship sails through fog so thick it feels solid, and the temperature drops so suddenly it steals your breath. Then faintly, there's a sound, like glass breaking underwater, like a groan stretched too long. The helmsman stiffens, and every man who's made this voyage before goes silent at once. That's how you know. Ice, somewhere nearby, shifting, drifting, searching. The water changes colour when the ice is close. The grey goes pale, milky. You can see small shards floating past, bits that look harmless until you remember how deep the bigger ones go. They're not blocks sitting on the surface. They're mountains beneath you. What you see is just the tip. The rest lies waiting below, patient, indifferent. The ship glides between them, and every man's breath turns shallow. You can hear the faint crackle of frozen salt water against the hull, the sound sharp enough to feel in your teeth. The oars slow. No one speaks. Even the wind seems to hush. The helmsman adjusts the rudder with a motion so small you barely see it, guiding the longship between the pale shapes that slide by on either side. You want to look, but you're afraid to see what's there. The fog hides most of it, but every now and then a ghostly wall drifts past. A slab of ice taller than the ship, close enough that you could reach out and touch it if you were suicidal enough to try. It groans as it moves, a sound so deep it feels like it comes from inside the earth. The sea doesn't roar here, it whispers, and the whisper is worse. You hold your breath when the hull bumps against something. A faint jolt, almost gentle, but enough to make your stomach twist. The wood creaks, the sound stretching along the length of the ship. You imagine the crack spreading, water rushing in. You picture yourself sliding into that freezing black without even time to scream. You grip the oar tighter until your knuckles ache. The man next to you mutters a prayer you don't recognise. You don't join him, but you understand the instinct. The danger isn't just the ice you can see, it's the kind you can't. The hidden edges that drift just below the surface, invisible until they scrape your hull and tear the seams open like paper. The old men called them the sea's teeth. You start believing that. You listen for the scrape, the grind, the fatal crunch. Every small noise becomes an accusation. When nothing happens, you exhale slowly, the relief sharp as pain. Sometimes the ice closes in so tightly that the sea changes its voice entirely. The waves flatten, trapped between the floating slabs. The sound turns muted, the ship moving through slush instead of water. The oars drag heavy. The blades don't splash. They hiss. You can see chunks of frozen sea bumping against each other, shifting with the motion of the water. They sound like bones knocking together. The men row slower, careful not to make waves that might shove ice against the hull. You realise how fragile the ship really is. Planks and nails standing between you and a grave made of cold. When the ice clears, the fear doesn't leave. It just changes shape. The water opens up again, black and vast, and you start thinking about waves instead. The crushing kind. The kind that look like hills in the dark and move faster than sound. You've seen one already once, when the sea decided to remind everyone who was in charge. It rose from the horizon like a wall, silent until it wasn't. A white line of foam stretching from one end of the world to the other. The helmsman shouted then, just once, and everyone moved at once, no hesitation. The sail came down, the oars dug deep. The wave hit before you had time to think. You don't forget the sound it made. It wasn't thunder or wind. It was weight, a solid impact that made the air vibrate in your chest. The ship tilted so far, you thought it wouldn't come back. Water crashed over the sides, freezing on contact. The deck became a sheet of ice, slick and treacherous. You slipped, caught yourself on a rope, felt the fibres bite into your palms. Men shouted, some fell, one disappeared over the side. No one said his name after. The sea doesn't return what it takes. When it was over, when the wave had passed and the ship somehow still floated, everyone went quiet. You could hear the water dripping off the shields, the ice cracking on the deck, the slow groan of wood adjusting to survival. The cold hit twice as hard then, the air so sharp it burned your lungs. You looked at the others and saw the same expression you felt on your own face, disbelief mixed with gratitude, and underneath it, the understanding that it would happen again. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but someday soon. You stop fearing storms after a while. You start fearing the quiet between them. The long stretches of calm where you know the sea is thinking. The horizon looks still, but you can feel it waiting. You learn to read the signs. The sudden drop in wind, the way the air goes heavy, the strange silence that settles just before the next assault. The ocean breathes in, holds it, and you brace for the exhale. You hear stories from the older men about ships split clean in half by ice, of waves so big they lifted a crew into the sky before dropping them straight down. They talk about men freezing to death mid-row, hands still locked around their oars. They say it like facts, not warnings. Everyone listens, no one laughs. The stories aren't entertainment, they're instructions. You store them in your mind like survival lessons. The fear doesn't fade, but it changes. It becomes quieter, more disciplined. You don't panic anymore when the sea rises. You just move. You tighten the ropes, brace your knees, shift your weight. You look to the helmsman and follow his hand. You breathe when you can. The fear lives with you now. It's part of the air, part of the rhythm of rowing. You stop trying to fight it. You just carry it, like another layer of clothing. The worst nights are when the sea tricks you. It starts calm, almost gentle, and you let yourself relax. Then out of nowhere, the wind changes direction, the air grows heavy, and the first massive wave appears without warning. It's always the same. You look up, and it's already there, rising higher than anything human should face. You row harder without thinking. The ship climbs, the bow cutting through foam. For a heartbeat, you're weightless at the top. Then you fall, the drop so sudden it makes your stomach twist. You slam back into the sea, water exploding over you, freezing instantly on your cloak. You wipe your face, gasping, and laugh. Not out of joy, but disbelief that you're still here. When the night finally ends, when dawn leaks through the clouds, and the sea looks deceptively calm again, you don't relax. You can't. You know what hides beneath that smooth surface. You've seen the ice float past like ghosts, and the waves rise like monsters. You've heard the ship cry like a living thing, and wondered how much more it can take. You pull your cloak tighter, not for warmth, but for armour. You take a slow breath and listen. The water slaps gently against the hull, innocent and rhythmic. It's a lie, and you both know it. The Viking night isn't quiet. It only pretends to be. You'd think that when the wind dies and the sea calms, silence would finally come, but it never does. Out here, silence doesn't exist. It hides between noises, slipping in and out before you can recognise it. The longship becomes its own kind of instrument, and every sound it makes has weight, has purpose, has consequence. The men, the wood, the ropes, the sea, they all play their part in the song that never stops. The first thing you always hear is the water. Not waves exactly, those come and go, but the steady sound of it moving beneath the hull. A deep slosh, the whisper of liquid muscle pressing against wood. When the ship glides right, the noise is almost soothing. When it doesn't, it's sharper. A knock here, a snap there, a wet crack that makes you glance instinctively toward the edge. You learn what every version of that sound means. What's harmless, what's dangerous, what's only pretending to be harmless. You lie there in the dark, half awake, and you can tell from the tone of the water whether you'll live to see another morning. Above that comes the creak of the ship itself. The longship never stops moving. It expands and contracts with the cold, its timbers stretching and sighing as though the wood remembers the tree it came from. The sound is constant, low and deep, like an old animal breathing in its sleep. Sometimes it pops, a sudden, sharp complaint as a joint shifts. The men don't react anymore. The creaking has become a kind of reassurance. If you can hear the ship, it means it's still whole. The day the ship goes silent, you'll know something's gone wrong. Then there are the ropes. They hum in the wind, even when there's no wind at all, tight lines groaning where they meet the mast. The sound rises and falls with the motion of the sea, a slow rhythm that feels almost human. You can tell who tied which line just by the sound it makes. Each knot, each tension, has its own small voice. The ropes slap against wood when the ship rolls, or when someone shifts in their sleep. Every sound means something, and you learn them all because there's nothing else to do but listen. The men add their own layer to the night, breathing mostly, a rough chorus of exhaustion. The sound isn't uniform. Some breaths come shallow and fast, others deep and heavy. There's snoring too, the kind that rattles in the throat and breaks every few seconds. One man wheezes, another grinds his teeth, another mutters through dreams. You can't tell if he's speaking to someone or to himself. Sometimes someone lets out a groan that sounds like pain, but it might just be the noise of a body turning on cold wood. You start recognizing people by their sounds more than their faces. You could tell who's still alive in the dark just by listening. There's always the sound of dripping. You never find the source. It's water from the sail, from the ropes, from the condensation that forms under the curved planks of the hull. Drip, pause, drip. Sometimes it lands on your hand or your forehead. Sometimes it falls somewhere else and echoes. You get used to it, but your body never stops flinching at first contact. The cold is sharp enough to sting, then fade into nothing. The drips remind you that you're surrounded by the sea, that the water is always there, waiting to find its way in. The wind joins when it wants to. On some nights, it's a whisper sliding between the shields lined along the sides of the ship. The edges of the metal fittings hum faintly as the air moves over them. On others, it roars, turning the sail into a drum that thrashes and groans. You can hear the difference between a friendly wind and one that wants to kill you. The friendly kind moves steadily, pulling you forward in long, predictable breaths. The bad kind screams. It hits from nowhere, tearing at your hood, shoving cold into your ears. The ship groans louder when that happens, and men wake one by one, pretending it's coincidence. There's a smell to each sound too. You can't explain it, but it's there. The scent of wet rope when the mast shifts. The faint tang of tar when the hull creaks. The stink of sweat when a man turns over. The sounds carry the smells, and the smells carry memory. When someone breathes near you, you can hear the damp rasp of wool rubbing against fur. It's strange how much life there is in a place so hostile. Sometimes, if you're awake long enough, you start hearing things that aren't really there. The sea plays tricks like that. The rhythmic splash of water starts to sound like voices, low and distant. A whisper that you can almost understand if you just listen harder. The first few times it happens, you turn your head and look. Then you stop. You realise there's no one speaking, just your own mind filling the emptiness. It's worse when you're half asleep. The line between sound and imagination disappears. You start to believe the ocean is speaking. Maybe it is. You stop asking. The cold itself makes noise. You can hear frost forming on the ship, the faint crackle of ice crystals spreading across the planks. The furs stiffen as they freeze, making soft, papery sounds when men shift beneath them. The air buzzes sometimes, so cold that it hums. You breathe in, and the air whistles faintly through your nostrils. Even your own heartbeat sounds different. Slower, heavier, like it's wrapped in wool. You can hear it when you lie perfectly still. A dull thump behind your ribs, sinking with the roll of the ship. Every so often, a gull cries in the distance, invisible in the dark. The sound carries for miles, lonely and thin. You look up automatically, but there's nothing to see, just black sky and a few cold stars. The cry reminds you that land exists somewhere, even if it's days or weeks away. It fades, and the sea takes back the sound. Then comes the groan of the oarlocks when it's time to move again. The shift from rest to work has its own noise. Benches scraping, men cursing softly, the splash of blades entering the water. The sea answers, slapping against the hull, heavy and indifferent. The song of the night becomes rhythm again. The noises blend into motion. The world turns from half sleep to duty. You start to understand why sailors say the ship talks. It does. It groans, sighs, warns, comforts. Every creak and shudder means something. You listen the way you'd listen to an elder telling you how to survive. You can't fix the ship when it's angry, but you can read its tone. You know when it's calm, when it's afraid, when it's holding itself together by will alone. You learn to whisper back, not with words, but with your movements. Softer steps, quieter breathing, respect. Some nights everything aligns. The sea smooths, the ropes fall still, the men sleep without turning, and even the wind decides to rest. The soundscape shrinks until all that's left is the faint knock of water against wood and the slow exhale of the crew. In that fragile quiet, you can almost forget where you are. The darkness feels close, but not cruel. You close your eyes and let the rhythm cradle you. You think about what silence might actually sound like if you ever heard it again. No water, no wind, no wood, no breath, just nothing. The idea scares you more than storms. Out here, noise is proof of life. Silence means the sea has won. So you lie still, listening, counting every creak and sigh like a heartbeat. You don't want them to stop. You never do. You can't tell when sickness begins out here. It doesn't arrive suddenly, not with a cough or a fever you can name. It creeps in like the cold. Quiet, invisible, familiar. At first it's just fatigue. Everyone feels it. The kind that clings to your bones and doesn't let go no matter how long you rest. You tell yourself it's the rowing, the lack of sleep, the cold air burning your lungs. Then one morning, you notice your breath feels heavier, your chest tight. You cough just once, and the sound echoes strangely in the still air. That's how it starts. The sea doesn't forgive sickness. There's no room for weakness on a long ship. You can't hide it. There's nowhere to go. The others notice before you admit it to yourself. A man who's ill moves differently, slower, quieter. He starts missing the rhythm when the oars dip. His grip slips on the handle. His voice sounds rougher when he calls out. At first, no one says anything. Then someone mutters, and the space around him grows wider. You can't afford contagion out here. A single fever can spread through the crew faster than the wind changes. Frostbite is worse because it's silent. You don't feel it coming. You just stop feeling altogether. It begins at the edges, fingers, toes, ears. They go numb first, and you think that's a blessing. Pain would be worse, you tell yourself. But then the colour fades. White, then grey, then a shade of purple that looks wrong even in the half-light. The men joke about it sometimes, calling it the slow death, but there's no humour in their voices. They've all seen it before. You rub your hands, blow into them, try to keep the blood moving. The skin doesn't listen. The cold burrows deep, and you start to wonder if it's part of you now. You've watched men lose fingers out here. It's not sudden, not dramatic. One morning they just don't move right. They try to grip the oar, but their hands won't close. The flesh has gone stiff and pale, the nails blue. They keep rowing anyway, there's no other choice. The body sacrifices what it has so the rest survives. Later, when the pain returns, they grit their teeth and row harder. Sometimes the frostbitten flesh turns black. You don't talk about it. You pretend not to see. The sea doesn't allow sympathy. It smells it like blood. The sickness takes other forms too. Some men can't keep food down. The salted fish turns to acid in their stomachs, and they lean over the side to vomit until there's nothing left. Others get fevers that make their minds wander. They start talking to people who aren't there, seeing shapes in the mist. You try to ignore them, but the sound of a delirious man mumbling in the dark is hard to forget. Once, you woke in the middle of the night to find one standing at the edge of the ship, staring at the black water. You called to him softly, but he didn't answer. He just stepped away from the edge and lay back down, as if nothing had happened. You didn't speak of it in the morning. Endurance becomes the only currency that matters. You measure yourself not by strength or courage, but by how long you can keep doing the same thing. Rowing, eating, breathing, not collapsing. Every day you tell yourself to last one more hour, one more shift, one more wave. The body complains, but the mind stops listening. You start thinking of yourself as something separate from your own flesh. The meat can hurt all it wants. You just have to keep moving it. You learn small tricks. You rub your legs with snow to wake them when they go numb. You stamp your feet when you can. You chew on bits of cloth to stop your teeth from chattering too loud. You keep your hands moving even when you're not rowing, flexing them in time with the waves. The older men have their own methods, wrapping their fingers in wool soaked with animal fat, keeping bits of iron under their cloaks to warm them when the sun comes out. None of it works perfectly. The cold finds you eventually. You stop feeling hunger after a while. The stomach gives up before the rest of you does. You eat because you know you should, not because you can. The salt burns your throat, the bread scrapes, the ale tastes like metal. You drink anyway. When the body starts refusing food, it's a bad sign. You've seen it happen. A man will push the bowl away one night, saying he's not hungry, and within 2 days he can barely stand. The cold eats what the sea doesn't. Your eyes change too. The constant wind burns them raw. The salt dries them until blinking feels like scraping sandpaper across your skin. Some men lose sight for hours after storms, staring into the grey without seeing anything. You learn to squint, to shield your face with your hood, to turn your head away from the spray. It doesn't help much. The world still looks the same, endless, colourless, indifferent. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the quiet. The silence that comes when someone gives up. You can hear it the moment it happens. The rhythm breaks, the oar dips late. A man who's been shivering for hours suddenly stops. His head droops, his shoulders sag, and he exhales one long, tired breath. You call his name, shake his arm, curse at him. Sometimes he wakes, startled, mutters something, and starts rowing again. Other times he doesn't. Then you move him aside, cover him with his cloak, and keep rowing. There's no ceremony. The sea doesn't care, and neither can you. Not here, not now. Frostbite, hunger, fever, they all blur together after a while. Pain stops meaning anything. It's just background noise. You look at your hands and don't recognise them anymore. The skin is cracked, the nails blackened, the knuckles swollen. You move them anyway. They still obey. That's enough. You forget what warmth felt like. You forget what softness felt like. The only thing you remember clearly is endurance. The act of staying alive when the body has no interest in doing so. Some nights, when you finally lie down, you feel every injury at once. The cuts sting, the bruises pulse. Your joints throb in rhythm with the sea. You pull your cloak tighter, press your face into the fur, and breathe slowly. The smell is foul, sweat, smoke, rot, but it's your smell, proof that you're still here. You listen to the sounds of the others sleeping or pretending to. You count the breaths, the creaks, the groans. You match your breathing to theirs until your body remembers what rest is supposed to be. When dawn comes, you stand, stretch what still moves, and grab your oar. The cold hits you like a wall, but you push through it. You always do. The sickness, the frostbite, the hunger, they don't matter as long as you can still row. That's what endurance means out here. It's not strength or courage, it's obedience to survival. You move because you must. Breathe because you haven't stopped yet. The sea takes what it wants, but you're still here, for now. Or the cold starts in your body, but it ends in your mind. It's not just temperature anymore. It becomes something alive, something that thinks. At first, you tell yourself you can handle it. You felt cold before, back home, out hunting in the snow, crossing frozen fields, sleeping in barns with the wind howling through the cracks. But this isn't that kind of cold. This one doesn't end when the sun rises. It doesn't stop when you move. It doesn't forgive effort or reward endurance. It gets inside you, sits somewhere deep, and waits. The longer it stays, the quieter you become. You stop shivering after a while. That's when it gets dangerous. The body accepts defeat long before the mind does. You move slower, think slower. You start watching your own breath, because it's the only sign that something still works. You can see it fog in the air, forming small clouds that disappear as quickly as they appear. You count them like seconds. Each one means you're still alive. The exhaustion grows at the same pace. It seeps in just like the cold. Through the feet first, then up through the knees, the spine, until it settles behind your eyes. It makes the world smaller. You can't remember how long you've been awake, how many shifts you've rowed, how many times you've slept in the same damp spot. The sea eats your sense of time. The only clock left is your body, and it's running down. The mind begins to play tricks when you're this tired. You start to hear things that aren't there. Your name whispered from the other side of the deck. A voice calling through the fog. Laughter that doesn't belong to anyone alive. You tell yourself it's the sea or the wind. You don't say it aloud, because that would mean you've started to believe it. The men don't talk about the things they hear. They just look away when someone stares too long into nothing. Sleep doesn't help. It's too thin to matter. You drift off in short bursts, just long enough to forget where you are, only to wake again when the ship rolls or someone shifts beside you. The dreams are strange, too vivid, too cruel. You dream of warmth, of a hearth glowing red and gold, of lying beneath a roof that doesn't move. The warmth feels real for a moment, so real that you smile in your sleep. Then you wake, and the cold hits harder than before. It's worse after a good dream because you remember what comfort felt like, and remembering is pain. After enough days, you stop dreaming about home altogether. The brain starts protecting itself. You forget faces, voices, familiar places. You don't do it on purpose, they just fade. You keep the outlines, but not the details. Your world becomes smaller, stripped down to the essentials. Sea, wood, breath, cold. That's it. The rest of your life shrinks to background noise. The cold makes sure of it. You notice the smallest things now. The crack in the wood near your oar. The sound of ice forming on the ropes. The way your cloak stiffens when it freezes. They occupy your thoughts because they're manageable. You can't fight the sea or the cold, but you can watch a rope freeze. That small control becomes your anchor. The mind clings to tiny details when everything else is too big to comprehend. There's a point where exhaustion stops feeling like tiredness and becomes something else entirely. It's almost peaceful. You move automatically, your body doing the work without asking your mind's permission. You lose track of who's rowing beside you. The voices blur together. You stop counting strokes. You could row for hours like that, or maybe minutes. You can't tell the difference anymore. Time flattens. You exist in rhythm, nothing more. Sometimes you forget where you are. Not in the way a lost man forgets, but in the way a drowning man forgets air. You look at the sea and it looks back. And for a heartbeat, you can't remember why you're supposed to be afraid of it. The grey water looked calm, almost gentle. You could step into it, sink into that quiet, and stop shivering forever. The thought isn't suicidal, it's logical. It's rest. That's how the cold talks to you. It doesn't threaten, it promises peace. You shake it off, turn away, but it lingers. Everyone feels it eventually. That's why no one stands too close to the edge for too long. The men grow quieter as the days drag on. There's less to say. Words take effort, and effort is a resource better spent staying warm. You communicate with gestures now. A nod, a look, a shift of the hand. You can tell when someone's reaching their limit just by the way they breathe. The eyes dull first. Then comes the silent. A man stops cursing when the cold has beaten him. He stops complaining. He just works until he doesn't. You see it happen again and again, and each time you wonder how far behind him you are. The sea amplifies everything. Every pain, every fatigue, every stray thought. You feel emotions like echoes, delayed, hollow. Anger fades quickly because it burns too much energy. Laughter dies in the throat because it hurts the lungs. Fear remains, but it becomes quieter, more disciplined. You don't panic anymore. You just observe. You notice the way frost forms on your own fingers and think about how interesting it looks. The detachment isn't strength. It's surrender disguised as calm. Sometimes, when the night stretches too long, you find yourself talking quietly to the ship. You don't mean to. It just happens. You thank it for holding together, or you curse it for every groan that sounds like breaking. The wood creaks back, and for a second you imagine it's answering. You stop questioning the sanity of it. You just let it happen. The ship is the only thing that listens. The cold changes how you think about your body. It stops being yours. It's something you manage like a tool. You look down at your hands, red and raw, and think of them as objects. You feed them, you move them, but you don't identify with them. They're things that obey commands. And the moment you start thinking of them as yours, the pain becomes unbearable again. So you separate mind and body, thought and flesh. It's the only way to keep functioning. You find a rhythm to existence. Row, breathe, endure, sleep if you can, wake, repeat. There's comfort in the repetition. Predictable suffering is easier than chaos. The cold becomes part of the pattern, something expected. When it eases for a few minutes, you almost miss it. The body adjusts to pain like it adjusts to motion. You start believing that maybe you were built for this after all, even if you know that's a lie. The hardest part comes when the wind stops entirely. No movement, no sound, but your own breathing. That's when the exhaustion hits hardest. Without the distraction of waves or work, your body feels everything. The ache in your shoulders, the sting in your fingers, the tremor in your legs. The stillness becomes torture. You want the sea to move again, to shout, to remind you that there's still a world outside your suffering. When it finally does, you almost feel grateful. By the time the voyage has gone on long enough, you stop waiting for warmth. You stop imagining the end. The mind rewrites the rules. Cold becomes the default state of existence and you adapt. You no longer dream of fire. You dream of a day when the wind doesn't sting your face so much. That's what survival looks like out here. Not hope, not courage, just smaller expectations. A body that keeps moving, a mind that stays quiet, and a heart that keeps beating no matter how cold it gets. Dreams start creeping back when the cold stops being new. They come when your body has nothing left to burn but memory. They don't arrive every night, only when the exhaustion gets deep enough, when the wind finally softens, and your brain has room to wander. You don't control them. They come the way the tide comes, uninvited, unstoppable, familiar. And always they start the same way, with warmth. In the dream, you're back home. The air isn't grey, it's gold. There's light everywhere, the kind that touches instead of cuts. You can smell smoke from a hearth, the rich scent of burning wood that no storm can drown. The fire pops and sighs. Its heat reaches your face, and for a second you forget what cold feels like. You don't need to hide from it. You don't need layers or cloaks or movement. It just is. You stand there, hands out, watching your breath vanish into nothing, because the air isn't cruel anymore. You think you'll never forget this feeling. You always do. Someone speaks your name in the dream, a voice you know but can't place. It might be your mother, or your wife, or someone you once drank with and haven't seen in years. It changes every time. You turn toward it, and the room looks exactly as you remember. Wood beams, furs hanging on the walls, a clay lamp flickering beside a bowl of stew. You can smell it. Barley, onion, something fatty and rich. You can almost taste it. The scent wraps around you like a blanket. You sit, you eat, you laugh. It all feels real, down to the weight of the spoon in your hand. And then the ship creaks. Just once. A long, slow groan that slides through the dream like a knife through cloth. The fire flickers. The warmth thins, the faces blur. You try to hold on to them, but they dissolve into mist. The light goes first, then the sound, then the smell. When you wake, you're back under the frozen fur, mouth dry, body stiff, the world grey again. The air burns when you breathe. You lie still, your mind trying to climb back into the dream, but it's gone. Dreams don't linger out here. They break apart on waking, just like the waves. You tell yourself you won't fall for it again, that it's easier not to dream. But the next night, it happens anyway. Sometimes it's the longhouse again, the same flicker of orange fire on carved beams. Sometimes it's a field at dawn, frost on the grass, your breath clouding in front of you. You're carrying wood, or leading a horse, or walking toward the sound of a river. You hear laughter. You smell bread baking. The memory doesn't even belong entirely to you. It's half imagined, half remembered, but it feels right. The warmth of it presses against your chest until you think you might cry. Then you wake again, and the sound of the wind fills the silence where laughter used to be. Some of the men talk in their sleep. You can tell by their tone that they're dreaming too. Their voices go soft, almost kind, like they've forgotten where they are. One man murmurs a name over and over, his hand twitching as if reaching for someone. Another laughs once, quietly, then goes still again. You lie there listening, and for a moment you envy them. At least in sleep, they get to go home. You're too tired to dream most nights. When you do, it's the sea that follows you. The dreams of warmth always end in cold. The brain is cruel that way. It reminds you of comfort only to punish you with its absence. You wake up angry, Not at the dream, but at yourself for believing it. You pull your cloak tighter, bury your face in the damp fur, and tell yourself that warmth was never real, that it was always just imagination. But deep down, you know it was real once. That's what makes it worse. The strongest dreams come during the rare moments when the ship stops. The air gets still, and for once you're not moving. The absence of motion tricks the body into relaxing. You drift off easier then, sinking fast. That's when the dreams hit hardest. They feel longer, clearer. You see details, the grain of a wooden table, the way the light dances on a cup, the curve of a hand brushing yours. You smell earth again, smoke again, life again. You wake up crying sometimes, but the tears freeze before they fall. You wipe them away and pretend it's frost. The oldest men dream the most. They talk about it in whispers, ashamed of it, like it's weakness. One of them says the dreams come from the gods, from those who didn't make it home. Another says it's just the body dying slowly, showing you what it wants one last time. You don't argue either way. You've learned not to question anything that keeps you sane. Some nights, the dreams change. They start out warm, but end different. The fire dies in the hearth. The longhouse goes cold. You're sitting in the same chair, but the room is empty now. The bowl in front of you is frozen solid. You can hear the sea outside, though you're nowhere near it. The walls groan like the ship. You stand up, and the world tilts. And then you wake again, heart pounding, breath sharp. It takes a minute to remember which cold is real. You try to talk about it once. You mention the dreams to the man beside you during a rare calm. He listens, nods once, says he's had the same ones. Then he adds quietly, "That's how the sea gets you. It makes you think of fire." You both go silent after that. There's nothing else to say. You pull your hood lower, listen to the slow slap of waves, and let the thought settle. By the time the voyage stretches into weeks, the dreams become something else entirely. They stop being about home. They turn into the idea of warmth itself. No faces, no rooms, no sound, just the sensation of heat without form. A memory stripped of detail. You wake up reaching for it, hands open, grasping nothing. It is like chasing sunlight in a world that's forgotten colour. When the first real dawn breaks after a long storm, a pale beam of light slips through the clouds and hits your face. It's weak, barely there, but it's real. The warmth on your cheek feels like a dream you've had too many times to trust. You don't move. You just close your eyes and let it sit there for a moment, not daring to hope it lasts. For the first time in weeks, the warmth isn't imagined. It's small and fragile, but it's enough to remind you what it means to still be alive. Dawn comes slowly in the far north. It doesn't rise like a fire. It seeps in, pale and reluctant, a grey light that crawls across the water without warmth. You don't notice it at first, because the night never truly ends here. It just changes shade. The stars fade, the wind softens, and the horizon begins to show a faint bruise of colour, the softest suggestion of day. It's not sunlight the way you remember it, not gold or orange or forgiving. It's a diluted thing, thin as mist, more a memory of light than the real thing. But after so many nights without it, even that feels holy. The ship moves slower at dawn. The sea looks solid from a distance, an endless sheet of frozen glass broken into jagged plates. You can hear the ice before you see it, the low grinding of slabs rubbing against each other, the occasional crack echoing like a muffled thunderclap. The sound is deep and ancient, a voice from the sea itself. The longship pushes forward carefully, the bows splitting through patches of slush, the wood creaking in protest. You can feel every vibration through the deck, the cold seeping up from beneath, as though the ocean wants to reclaim its warmth from you. You pull your cloak tighter and lift your head just enough to see the first true colour in weeks. The horizon burns faintly pink, where the sun struggles to climb through the grey. It looks wrong somehow, too soft for this place. The light doesn't spread. It clings to the edge of the world like it's afraid to enter. The men squint into it, blinking, faces raw and cracked from frost. For a few seconds, the light reflects off the ice and makes everything shine. The water, the shields, even the frozen ropes glow with a dull shimmer. You forget about the cold, if only for the time it takes to breathe. The helmsman doesn't speak, but his eyes stay fixed on the horizon. The oars slow. The men are tired, but the sight of dawn changes something in the air. It doesn't give them strength exactly. It just gives them pause. The first light hits the side of the ship, and steam rises where the frost begins to melt. It doesn't last long, but the brief warmth smells different, cleaner. You breathe it in, and for the first time in days, the air doesn't bite. You watch the ice shift as the light grows. The slabs move like animals waking from sleep, bumping, scraping, drifting apart. Some pieces are white and clean, others grey and old, filled with trapped air that hisses when it escapes. The water between them glows a strange colour, blue and green and silver all at once. The sea looks alive in a way it never did in darkness. You can almost imagine it as a living thing, slow and massive, turning in its sleep beneath you. No one speaks during dawn. It's not silent out of reverence, it's silent out of disbelief. The world has been grey and cruel for so long that colour feels like a trick. The men just stare, the light reflecting off their eyes, their faces motionless. You can see how hollow their cheeks have become, how their beards have frozen into jagged shapes. The frost glitters like jewels across their cloaks. It would almost be beautiful if you didn't know how close beauty and death sit together out here. A gull appears first, a white blur cutting across the pale sky. Then another. Their cries slice through the stillness, sharp and real. The sound makes something in your chest ache. You'd forgotten what birds sounded like. For a moment, you believe it might mean land is near. No one says it aloud, but the thought passes quietly from one man to another. Hope doesn't need words to travel. The sunlight, weak as it is, touches your hands. You lift them slightly, half afraid the feeling is just imagination. It's faint, barely a whisper of warmth, but it's enough to make your skin prickle. You flex your fingers, watching how the light catches the frost that still clings to your nails. You can feel your heartbeat again, slow and heavy. It reminds you that you haven't frozen yet. You've survived another night. Out here, that's all dawn ever really means. You look over the edge of the ship and see the reflection of the sky in the ice-streaked water. The image is distorted, broken into shards by the ripples, but it's there, light on darkness, fragile and temporary. You catch yourself staring too long, eyes tracing the patterns, the cracks, the way the sun's reflection trembles. It looks alive, like it's breathing. You blink, and the illusion shatters into ripples. The ship keeps moving. The light stays behind. The men begin to move again. The sound of oars dipping back into the sea breaks the stillness. The rhythm returns, slow but steady. The creak of wood, the splash of water, the soft grunt of effort. It all sounds different in daylight. The sea's voice changes pitch. The oarlocks groan instead of scream. Even the cold seems quieter. The world feels almost normal again, almost survivable. You take another deep breath, and it doesn't hurt. It's been so long since that was true that you almost don't trust it. The air smells faintly of salt and nothing else. No rot, no damp wool, no smoke. Just clean, frozen emptiness. It fills your lungs and clears your head. You blink against the brightness and realise you've forgotten how colour feels against your eyes. It's like seeing the world through new skin. Some of the men smile, small weak smiles that barely move their faces. You do the same without meaning to. The moment doesn't erase the cold, or the hunger, or the exhaustion, but it gives them context. You see the frost on your cloak, the steam rising from the wood, the pale light catching on the edges of ice, and you think maybe it was worth it. Not the suffering, exactly, but the endurance. To have seen this, the dawn over the sea of ice, is to have proof that even this place, this frozen nowhere, can still change. The warmth fades quickly. The sun never climbs high here. It drifts along the edge of the sky like a tired lantern, casting long shadows across the ice. The beauty is brief, but that's what makes it powerful. You've learned that out here. Nothing good lasts, but it doesn't need to. The smallest mercy, a patch of light, a breath of warmth, a moment of calm can feel like salvation when you've lived this long in the dark. By the time the sun has fully risen, the colour has drained back into grey. The ice gleams dully, the sea resumes its slow pulse, and the air turns sharp again. But the memory of the light stays. It settles somewhere deep, beneath the layers of fatigue and frost. You close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to keep it alive in your mind. Then you open them again and reach for the oar. The work begins as always. The ship moves forward, carving its path through the cold. But now, for the first time in a long time, it moves toward light instead of away from it. Stepping onto land after weeks at sea feels wrong at first. Your legs don't trust the ground. They move like you're still rowing, every muscle expecting the world to sway. The solid earth feels like a trick, too steady, too certain. You stand there blinking at it, the world no longer rocking beneath you, and your body doesn't know what to do with the stillness. The silence is worse. You keep listening for the sea, the crash, the creak, the slap of waves, but it's distant now, a dull whisper behind you. The absence of noise feels heavier than the sound ever did. The first thing that hits you isn't joy or relief, it's disorientation. The air smells different. Earth instead of salt, pine instead of tar. The scent is so rich it makes you dizzy. You breathe in and cough. The land feels thick somehow, slower, denser. You can taste soil on your tongue, and it's almost too much. After months of sea wind, real air feels foreign. The men move awkwardly across the beach. They stumble, legs trembling, as though gravity itself has changed. Some fall to their knees on purpose, pressing their hands into the dirt like they need to be sure it's real. The sand feels warm, but not hot, just soft, pliant. It gives under your fingers. The feeling is strange after weeks of wood and ice. For a long time, no one speaks. There's no shouting, no laughter, not even prayer. Just the sound of men breathing in unison, as though trying to relearn how to live. Someone starts a fire. The smoke rises crookedly in the cold morning air. The smell of it spreads quickly. Real smoke, not the faint tang of smouldering tar. You move toward it like everyone else. The flames look unreal at first, too bright, too alive. You stand too close, trying to feel the heat. It hurts immediately. The sting of warmth after so much cold feels like punishment. The skin on your hands prickles and burns where the blood returns too quickly. You pull back for a second, then step closer again. The pain fades slowly, replaced by something else. Something like peace. The others crowd near the fire, hands stretched out, faces slack with exhaustion. No one speaks for a long time. You all just stare. The wood crackles, the sparks jump, and the sound is hypnotic. You forgot how loud fire can be. Every pop feels like a heartbeat, sharp and rhythmic. It's as if the world itself has restarted. The light glows on their faces, turning the frost on their beards into droplets. You watch them melt, one by one, tiny beads of survival turning into water and falling to the ground. You sit near the edge of the circle, not too close, letting the warmth come to you slowly. Your fingers hurt less now. You hold them up to the firelight and see colour return. First red, then pink, then something close to normal. You didn't realise how grey your skin had become until you saw what living flesh looked like again. You rub your hands together just to feel the motion and laugh quietly when the sensation no longer feels foreign. Food tastes different on land. Even simple things. Bread that isn't soaked in brine, fish that hasn't frozen solid, feel luxurious. You chew slowly, afraid that rushing will break the spell. The warmth of the fire seeps into your stomach as you eat. It's a strange, layered kind of comfort, one you'd forgotten existed. You can feel it spreading, not just through your body, but through your mind, pushing back the dull fog that's been there for weeks. The light changes as the sun climbs. The world around you begins to reveal itself. Rocks, trees, distant hills. The snow on the shore glitters, and the ice on the ship's hull catches the light like glass. It's almost beautiful. You watch the steam rise from your cloak as the frost melts, leaving it limp and dark instead of stiff and white. You smell wet wool, smoke, and something sweet, earth thawing in the sunlight. The scent is so rich, you close your eyes just to focus on it. Stillness takes longer to learn. You sit there, expecting something to move. The deck to shift, the ropes to snap, the world to tilt. But it doesn't. It stays still. The quiet grows louder the longer it lasts. You can hear everything now. The hiss of the fire, the creak of leather, the slow, uneven breathing of men too tired to celebrate. You realise that peace is noisy when you're not used to it. Your ears strain for danger that isn't there. One of the men lies down near the fire and doesn't move. For a second you think he's collapsed, but then you see his chest rising slowly. He's asleep. Really asleep. Not half conscious, not shaking under a cloak, not twitching with cold, just sleeping. His face looks strange in rest, younger somehow. You watch him for a while, not out of worry, but because you'd forgotten what calm looked like on another human being. You try to rest too. You lie on your back, the earth firm and solid beneath you, and stare at the sky. It feels wrong not to see the sail overhead. The emptiness above is dizzying. The clouds move slowly, no rush, no rage. You can't remember the last time you looked at the sky without fear. The light hurts your eyes, but you don't look away. You let it wash over you until your vision blurs. When sleep finally comes, it's deep and silent. No rocking, no cold, no sound of water beneath you. Your body doesn't twitch awake every few minutes. It just sinks, heavy and still. For the first time in months, the warmth doesn't leave when you close your eyes. You dream again, of fire, of quiet, of a world that doesn't move. This time you don't wake with panic. You wake slowly, blinking in sunlight, the sound of waves distant but no longer threatening. The men are already up, moving with new slowness. Some are gathering wood, others checking the ship. Their motions deliberate, careful. No one hurries, there's no need. The sea waits, but not today. The helmsman stands near the water, staring out at it. His face is unreadable. Maybe he's already thinking of the next voyage. You don't join him. You stay by the fire, your hands outstretched, soaking in the warmth that no longer feels borrowed. The earth beneath you is solid, the air still, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you're not trying to survive. You're just here. The quiet feels strange, but you don't push it away. You sit with it, breathing slowly, watching the fire burn low. It's almost unsettling how easily you forget the motion of the sea. The body adapts to suffering, but it also remembers peace. You can feel it returning piece by piece, like thawing wood, flexing in the heat. The thought of leaving again doesn't scare you, not yet, but it doesn't excite you either. The sea will call, as it always does. But for now, you let the stillness hold you. You listen to the fire crackle, to the wind moving softly through the trees, to the sound of your own heartbeat finally matching the world's calm rhythm. For the first time in a long while, the cold isn't inside you. It's only in the air. And you know now that you can live with that. They'll say later that Vikings never felt fear, that they rode through frozen storms with iron hearts, that they laughed in the face of death, that the North shaped men who couldn't break. That's how stories always go, stripped of the quiet, polished by the distance between truth and legend. But you know better. You lived the cold, the silence, the exhaustion that made thought itself a kind of pain. You know that endurance isn't the absence of fear. It's fear carried long enough to become routine. The sagas won't tell it that way. They never do. The truth is that no one was fearless. Fear sat on the ship with you every hour, every mile, every wave. It was there when you woke, when you rode, when you closed your eyes to try to sleep. It didn't roar or command. It whispered, steady and patient. Fear kept you alive. It made you double knot the ropes, check the sail, wrap your hands tighter around the oar when the water turned black. It reminded you to keep moving, to keep breathing, to stay small under the sky that never cared if you lived. The fearless didn't survive the sea. The cautious did. The myth comes from what men saw afterward. When the ship reached land and the crew stepped out, thin, pale, hollow-eyed, moving like ghosts, they didn't talk about how close they had come to freezing. They didn't describe the sickness, the hunger, the shaking hands. They just said, "We made it." That's what people heard. Survival without the suffering that built it. The gaps in the story filled themselves with admiration. Fearless became easier to believe than frightened. You remember those nights when even your breath hurt, when your fingers stopped listening, your body forgot warmth, and your mind whispered about sleep that might not end. There was no bravery in that, only persistence. But persistence looks like heroism to those who've never had to endure it. The difference between the two disappears in the telling. Endurance isn't glorious. It's slow, dull, repetitive. It's rowing when your arms don't lift anymore. It's eating when you can't taste. It's staying awake because you're too cold to dream. It's watching the sea swallow another man and saying nothing because you can't afford the weight of grief. That's endurance. The kind that grinds down the edges of who you were until all that's left is motion. And yet, somehow, that's what made them legends. You look back at the ship, pulled up now on the shore, the wood scarred from the journey. The frost is melting, the ropes hanging limp, the oars laid in rows like bones. It looks small now, impossibly small for the distance it crossed. You can still hear the echoes of its sounds, the creak of its ribs, the slap of waves, the heavy breath of men too tired to curse. The noise lives in you now, stitched into your memory. The ship is quiet, but you'll always hear it. They'll say you are fearless. You'll let them. It's easier that way. Let them have their songs and stories, their carved shields and bright halls full of warmth. Let them speak of warriors who never flinched, of explorers who laughed at the storm. You won't correct them. Truth is a poor story, and stories are what outlast flesh. You'll sit by the fire, the heat finely soft on your hands, and listen to them tell it the way they need to. But inside, you'll remember. You'll remember how fear felt like a heartbeat, how every breath of freezing air tasted like defiance, how endurance wasn't born from courage, but from necessity. You'll remember that what the world calls bravery was mostly exhaustion, that you didn't conquer the sea, you just refused to die in it. That's what the sagas miss. Not the glory, but the struggle. The Viking spirit wasn't forged in fearlessness. It was built in spite of fear. It lived in the small decisions, the tightening of a cloak, the steadying of an oar, the choice to rise when your body said no. It was the quiet kind of strength that never needed to shout, the kind that endures, unseen, uncelebrated. You stand now by the fire, the flames reflecting in your eyes. The sea is behind you, calm for once, pretending it never meant harm. The wind carries the faint smell of salt and ash. You look out at the horizon and know you'll go back one day. Not because you want to, but because it's what you do. The sea calls and men answer. Not out of courage, but because the motion has become part of them. You take a slow breath. The air is still cold, but it doesn't cut anymore. The warmth from the fire seeps into your bones, deep enough that you almost believe it will stay. The others laugh softly nearby. Thin, tired laughter, but real. You close your eyes and listen to it, letting it fill the space where the sea used to live in your mind. Fear will come again, and so will the cold. But for now, there's stillness, there's warmth, there's life. And when the stories begin, when the myths of the fearless spread, you'll know the truth they were built on. You'll know what endurance really costs. And you'll know that, out there on the endless sea, surviving was never about being fearless. It was about being afraid and rowing anyway.